of course, had a few technical difficulties. Of course, the more people that you're trying to get everything to work, the more potential, failure points and everything like that. Of course, let's not forget Mercury retrograde is in full effect. So, accounting for all that, I think we're doing pretty good. Everybody's here and looking forward to today's show. So, welcome in, everyone. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, and the One Great Work Network. Shout out to Will for producing these shows and streaming them out there to that platform. So today is May 6th. We're live every Saturday at noon Central. And today we are getting into part 3 of this series regarding masculine and feminine trauma. We started off by what men must endure, got into it with Will Keller and Rodney, just like the male experience and the unique challenges and trials. Followed by last week, we were joined by Stephanie Mo Davis and Leslie Powers, where they sort of shared insight into the feminine side of things. And today, as you can see, we're renewing the vows. We are bridging the gap. We're healing the wounds. Metaphorically, of course, we've got a lot of work to do out there in the macro aspect of this, but that is the intention of this show, is just doing my part to try to bring light on these issues. This is a very serious problem, and it's going to get a lot worse if we don't figure this shit out. Like, end of the human species worse. You know what I'm saying? So that's why we're here. All these truth warriors are going to gather together and get into it. So big show. Shout out to everyone tuning in. Give some love down in the chat. Make some noise for that algorithm. Pump it up and drop a like real quick as well. Thank you for everyone tuning in. My name is Logan Hart. Let's go ahead and get into it. So, welcome into the show. If you're new here, this is the Wizard Factory. We are all about giving you the spiritual tools and mindsets to live a more empowered life. If you're new here, welcome to the growing community of those seeking self-empowerment, spiritual evolution, and a tribal family. Remember the tribe, subscribe down below, and make sure you click that notification bell so that you're not relying on these terrible algorithms to give you meaningful and truthful content. And as for that like button, of course, you know what to do.
Smash, smash, smash. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So kicking things off, as you guys know the drill, we are going to get into some astrological weather with Rodney Goodwin. Rodney, what's up, brother? How we doing today?
Hey, man. It's been an intense few days with this eclipse energy. And if anyone has, major Taurus or Scorpio energy in context, the 2-8 axis is what we were dealing with in context to the full moon in Scorpio, and that was an eclipsed energy as well. So we were dealing with a lunar eclipse there. And that was very, very deep shadow aspects that may have arised within you in context of taking a look at things that, where things are at to that, and then being able to move forward now by looking at it and making serious adjustments and recalibrations in context to leaving the old, shedding the old snake skin. You know what I'm saying? Don't tread on me. Shedding the old snake skin and then allowing the renewal to take place within us, because we are dealing with major resets right now in context to Mercury and Uranus. So, anytime the sun comes in and it does a conjunction with a planet, we call that it's called a kazami. So it's like the planet is experiencing the power of the sun within that particular energy. And so what it does is that it brings enlightenment, illumination, insight, foresight, those type of things to that particular energy. And we just had, basically what Mercury is retrograde now. And so we're dealing with a lot of chaotic trickster energy that's going on in context to that Kazami reset that just happened. and so now Mercury's retrograde, out of the sun area somewhat, but now we're in a 4-month cycle with Mercury. So it's going to take 4 months for Mercury then to come into another conjunction when it goes direct with Sun. So we're in this 4-month period now where, right now Mercury's retrograde till the 14th, and then we'll have somewhat of a shadow period in the 2 weeks after to the very first part of June. So I would recommend, not signing any contracts right now, not making any major decisions in your life that are going to affect things going forward. I would wait until things go direct with Mercury, because there's a lot of trickster energy. You know what this is called? It's called Prometheus retrograde. Anytime when the sun comes in conjunct and then it moves across, in a retrograde formation, and then sun continues to move on, Mercury continues to back up. And so what did Prometheus do? He stole the fire from Zeus to bring it to mankind, and he tricked the gods, right? So it's more Loki energy type of thing, right? It's kind of what we're dealing with.
When is Mercury retrograde going to be done?
The 14th of May.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and then
I do have some contracts I need to sign, so come on now.
yeah, and then I would let it, maybe try to go direct for a little bit before you step into anything major, in context to contracts and making choices and decisions going forward, because there can get, with this retrograde energy, in context to the trickster aspect, there can be little agendas and things that you're not seeing. That are veiled, because trickster energy is veiled, right? There's agendas there, but it's veiled. You're being tricked. It's Loki energy, Prometheus type of thing, right? That's why they call it Prometheus retrograde. So it comes into a space where you have to really internalize things, and you can get the great ideas and the great, the things that are coming to you, but to put them into action, you want to wait till Mercury actually moves direct before you actually put anything into choices. And that's just a smart thing to do, from an astrological perspective. I understand that there's certain times and you have certain deadlines and stuff that you just can't do it. You got to do it. But if you have the choice, make the choice, and let Mercury go direct, and try to get out of that shadow area, those trickster areas, So I don't know if anybody knew about that, but it's a lot of trickster energy when Mercury's retrograding, especially with Taurus right now, and that's a financial aspect. So we're dealing with money. We're dealing with what? All these different aspects to the financial realm. And so this is where things can get tricked. You can get really tested during this time period as well, in context to finances, on how you're going to actually be moral with them. And that will bring a test also in context to that trickster energy, because you were like, oh, I can get away with this. Nobody will know. It's just coming into my field. And wow, I could actually probably, pull this off, even though it's a little trickster, it's shadowy. I could probably pull it off because, nobody's really going to know. But who's going to know? You are. See, you're going to know. You're going to know that you broke cosmic principle. See? And so sometimes during these retrogrades, we get tested. And especially when it's in Taurus right now, because this is where we're dealing with finances with Taurus. So the other thing that's happening that's very, very powerful is in a few days, Sun is going to conjunct and reset the Uranus energy. So we could have some powerful astrological weather in context to volcanoes, earthquakes, weather patterns, hardcore storms. I mean, there could be some really major weather, come up in context to the psychic aspect. This is a lot about people don't understand the first law sometimes, I don't think, of mentalism, on how powerful the law of mentalism is, because all is mind, right? So if there's dark sorcery going on the planet, which we know there is, it's very satanic, it's very dark, right? They input that into the mind of the collective in context to all these areas that they have where they can input the information into the mind. And then if the collective believes it, it manifests, because they're believing what they're being told. See? And so that's why we do what we do, because we understand cosmic principle, cosmic law, and how natural law works within us. And so what are we doing? We're setting the precedent to come against that dark sorcery, that first veil aspect in context to all is mind, to the first law of mentalism, and then taking it to vibrational correspondence, and then cause and effect in context to our choices. So when you're dealing with Mercury retrograde, you're going to be tested in these areas because of this. Now, Uranus is resetting, and it's doing this heart of the sun thing now with Uranus. Okay. So what's going to happen here, right? This is where we get our new ideas, our new innovations, our new power base in context to, the Uranus energy and our awakening and our transformation and our rebel aspect and our maverick aspect, right? And so we're dealing with a brand new energy that's getting ready to pop open in us, start to open up in us. And if you've got placings in Taurus, wherever they're at in that gate, you're going to feel this. This is going to be conjunct directly with my sun, and tomorrow's my birthday. So literally, like, I'm having a Uranus sun conjunction with my natal sun tomorrow. So it's very powerful for me personally. I'm feeling it. I'm going through a lot of changes, innovations, new ideas. So what it does is it allows you to actually look at things from a totally different perspective and be able to come up with new ideas and new innovations to old paradigms. And then being able to take those old paradigms and transform them into something brand new that you never thought of. See, that's the Aquarian energy. That's what it does. It actually, you could be like at your computer, just doing some, menial thing or just menial task, whatever it is at work. And all of a sudden, something will just drop right into your spirit, right into your mind. And you're just like going, oh, wow, man, I never saw that, And then all of a sudden it brings what? Illumination. This is what Uranus does. And when it's conjunct sun, it's resetting that aspect. See? So we're getting solution orientated now instead of allowing the old paradigms to rule us in context to our past and the old wounds and the old trauma-based mindset and loops that we've been on. And it's going to bring an illumination to those aspects because Mercury's retrograde also in Taurus. So that's going to bring us, some understanding and understanding of the shadow aspect in context of what we need to transmute. So Mercury retrograde, Sun, and Uranus all working together in the gate of Taurus right now. And the axis of that was what? When you're looking at it, it's the 8th gate of Scorpio, right? Which is very much the shadow. And that's where the full moon came in context. So it's being able to transmute that shadow aspect into that 2-8 axis, see? Because that full moon in Scorpio was a big energy, huge energy. I mean, it felt like I was being torn apart yesterday. Like I was just being ripped apart and then put back together. And that's what it kind of does with the Scorpion energy, because to transform and transmute anything, you have to what? You have to change. And you have to be able to change, you've got to see what you're changing to. And if you're not seeing what you're changing to, then you're what? You're in the darkness. You're in the shadow. You're bumping into walls. You're bumping into all kinds of shit.
It's like you're flying blind.
Right. And so you don't have any radar, right? And that's where your moon gets jammed, because you've got no radar in context to what? Your navigation, your thought, your mind, and then dropping that down into your emotions. And this is how your emotional intelligence gets manipulated in context to jamming your thoughts. See, and this is where we betray ourselves in context to the trickster energy within us. See, we compromise, we rationalize. Oh, it's okay. I can get away with this. I can do this. I can do that. It's not a big deal. It's just a small thing. Well, all the small things add up to big things. So if you're not faithful in the small things, how the hell are you ever going to be a power base in context to actually being faithful when you're inputting consciousness into the collective? How can you be trusted with that? See? And so that's the idea of this transit, right? So it's going to bring a reset also to freedom. And this is the big reset in context to Sun, and that conjunction with Uranus, freedom to finances. This is what we're stepping into in context to this as well. So new ideas, new innovations, new things are going to open up in context to the financial realm. And we're going to see more bank failures. We're going to see more, aspects that are going to come with this particular transit, because this is what we're dealing with right now. See? I saw where Bitcoin just dropped about 1,000 points to yesterday,
Mhm.
and today. So it took a hit, see, during this transit, right? Because there's a reset happening. So it actually is bringing an opportunity to actually get in on some Bitcoin as it drops down to because it's going to come back up.
Yeah.
I'm not giving financial advice. I'm just, saying in context to maybe what, I want to do,
Oh, yeah.
personally,
My plan is to accumulate over the next like 1 to 2 years, depending on how much. I think the real big question, not to tangent too much, is how much is the macro situation actually going to affect Bitcoin and the crypto sector? Because there's like, it's a risk asset and it's been,
Yeah,
performing as a risk asset class. However, it's like at some point that other narrative of being the hedge against inflation,
exactly.
sound money, all that is going to kick in. It's just a matter of when. So like I think a recession is very likely coming, and then the real question is like, is it going to behave like a risk asset through a recession, or is it going to finally be where people start putting their money as a safe haven, basically? But anyways, that's a whole
Right.
other
Yeah. Yeah.
topic.
Yeah. And we can get into all the different aspects and the chess moves that countries are making in context to the dollar and all that shit
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
going on. But you know what? That's not what we focus on. We're focusing on our internal work, right? And what we're actually doing, and then allowing those innovations and ideas to come to us, and then stepping in and not being afraid. This is also resetting our authenticity. You
mhm,
know, and allowing ourselves to level up our authentic expression in context to our soul expression, because what the sun represents soul, right? Sun, soul, kingdom, will
yeah.
force, right? Our how we're perceiving things. What are we building with our kingdom?
Right. And I love how this relates to, again, the topic that we're getting into here today, because there's a renewal, like you mentioned at the beginning, of freedom, right?
Yes,
Connections.
yes,
And you have the sun doing its thing. It went through an eclipse, then the moon went through an eclipse, and
yes,
now we're bringing that back together, the masculine and feminine, the sun and the moon. It's
yes.
really beautiful how that's all lining up.
Yes, and that's what actually eclipses do, because your sun and your moon, right? There's a balance there, because when they're in opposition, they're on opposite points, right? So you have to find balance with that. And what an eclipse does, it helps you to see the shadow aspects in context to finding recalibrating that balance between sun and moon in your life.
Hmm.
That's what an eclipse is. One of the functions of an eclipse is supposed to do. And it brings that harmony back between your thought, your emotion, and your will force and your choices, and bringing things back into alignment in context to your sun and moon. And
Hell
that's
yeah.
the positive and negative charge. You could look at it as the feminine and masculine aspect as well, in context to what we're wheeling out with this segment. The
Yeah.
other thing that's happening here is that it's breaking the stagnation. See, and so it's literally like breaking and breaking down the programming to the chaos and stagnation that we're in and that we can get in this path work. Because stagnation is sometimes, when you get in the midst of it, it's a bitch to get out of, because you have to do things that are going to forge you, in context to a legacy. And the legacy is 10th gate to your MC line in context to your wheel. So what legacy are you trying to leave in your life, to what you're forging with your will force, with your sun, right? And then the lunar nodes help you to recalibrate that will force and purpose in context to your north node or your north star, because that in your chart, that's where you're actually not as familiar with. So that's why you have to navigate towards your North Star, because that's a place where it may be unfamiliar territory to your soul complex and what you're trying to carve out within the universal, time matrix.
Mhm.
So, and then your South node then becomes the area where you are actually more familiar with, and it's easy to drop down into that South node, because that's actually where the healing needs to take place. So once you start healing that South Star in context to your past, dealing with your past aspects, right, and bringing that into alignment and connecting the head of the serpent to the tail, right,
Mm.
when in Rahu and Ketu,
K2 and
right,
Rahu. Yep.
right. What we're trying to actually do is connect those. See, and I'm not going to get into the mythos of that, but we're trying to connect our purpose and heal our wound, and then
Mhm.
connect that, right, because the head's been severed. So we're trying to bring it together, and so that's why Rahu sometimes becomes the illusion or the obsession. See,
Hmm.
because we're not familiar with so familiar with that energy
It's in the mind.
because it's all in the mind, right?
Yes.
Exactly. And so
The
that's what we're dealing with.
the body is here where,
It's your
in the
body of work.
reality
Yes.
field, but it's also the body is where, you store your traumas, that stagnant energy, like you were saying.
Yeah, somebody just said here, I think Mark Michael, I am Uranus conjunct Sun. Okay, that's a powerful aspect in context to change and freedom and being a spark plug to
Mm,
that change in your own personal life, and then potentially as a teacher in context to connection to bringing things to the collective aspect as well. So that's a great conjunction to have, man. I've got Uranus trine to my Jupiter at 0 degrees, so that really helps me pound things through when you start getting hit, and we all do. We got hit with that depression, we get hit with that shadow, right? We get hit with that, and it tries to tamp down the energy in context to our internal dialogue. That's where you need that energy, that Uranus conjunct Sun, that Uranus trine Jupiter. That's where you draw on that energy. And you say, no, and you become that warrior. You find your Mars. See, and when you find your Mars there, wherever your Mars placing is, then that's the energy you use to pound through, to break through, to bring your sword out, as a warrior.
that's right. Once your honest starts getting pounded, man, it's on. You gotta take.
Yeah, man, because it's going to reveal things that maybe you don't want to look at, right? Because it's the lightning strike. We could look at it in context to the Tower card.
Mm,
Because it brings the lightning strike to a paradigm or to an old paradigm that needs to change in your life. Because guess what? Your avatar is getting pretty disgusted, and your higher self's getting pretty disgusted because you haven't changed. You're continuing the same patterns, right? And so that's what Uranus does. It brings the spark plug energy in context to the awakening and helps you to break through that programming. And that's why Uranus is sitting in Taurus right now, because we've got major, major stuff happening in context to that Taurus gate right now.
mm.
Which is again dealing with finances, but it's also dealing with your self-worth, your self-validation, and your self-love in context to Venus. So this is all being checked right now and
Mm.
tested. And so with Mercury setting there, don't be surprised in context to this retrograde if things come up in context to your shadow and trickster energy, because that eighth gate is sitting there on the opposition that we just had with the full moon eclipse. So be ready to become the warrior in context to transmuting these energies, and you've got Uranus sitting in the gate to help you.
Yeah, it's so much more empowering just getting this kind of insight so that you know what you're supposed to do. It's like you understand the context of the battle that you're going through. It doesn't feel like just pointless suffering. You're like, "Oh, this is why I'm here. This is why this is happening, and this is what I'm supposed to be doing." It's very empowering, at least for me. Just kind of like remembering that, and that this is all a spiritual experience. It's not just, the nihilistic kind of, oh, everything's meaningless, where life is suffering and all this kind of stuff. No, it's like this is all moving us towards something, and it's as long as we're doing the work, then it's going to be really, really good on the other side.
Yeah, if
So,
you're in the mindset of suffering and the world's not fair, and I never get a break, those are shadow aspects. you
mhm.
know and these are what you have to transmute, because you're going to continue to have that paradigm in your life in context to your state of mind if you don't transform and transmute. See, and so that's where you have to be able to grab pull your sword out, because this is where you have to cut through that shit. See, and realize your self-worth, realize your self-validation, bring that big love to yourself. Do things for yourself that are going to empower the narrative and the paradigm in your life, so that you can actually make a transformation to truth and freedom. See, and that's what this movement's all about. See, breaking the stagnation, destroying the programming, burning it to the, excuse my language, man, but burning it to the fucking ground.
And go for
See,
it, man.
you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about. And you have to be able then to bring the phoenix rising out of those ashes, and out of those ambers, and out of those coals, so that you are screaming with when you take flight in context to the eagle or the aspect of the phoenix when you rise out of those ashes.
Right, just like Odin screamed as he
Yes,
took up the runes.
that's right, exactly, man, because he pulled them from Ganunagap, see,
Right,
out of the womb of creation,
absolutely.
you know.
Rodney, always powerful stuff, man. Thank you for gifting us with your wisdom and insights. Quickly tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, transit readings are my forte. But I do rune readings, I do tarot readings, I do nine world readings, I do counseling. I got a Saturn reading. I mean, you can go to my website at hardcoreproductions.com. You can hit me up at hardcoreproductions9@gmail.com. Go to my Facebook page. You can actually book a session on my Facebook page at Hardcore Productions. You can hit me up on Rodney Goodwin at Messenger, and my link tree link to the link tree is in the
Description box down
description
below.
below.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely hit him up.
yeah.
Thank you, my
So,
man.
so
Appreciate
that's the
you.
energies right now that are going on, man. Powerful stuff, and I can tell you right now, the Uranus aspect in context to the unpredictable, it's going to happen in your lives. I mean, something's going to come up, and you're going to go, holy crap, that came out of nowhere. That's Uranus, and it's just bringing the energy in context to looking at something. So don't try to turn away from what you're being taught. Even if it looks malevolent in your life, it doesn't mean that it's malevolent. It means that there's things that you need to learn how to transmute and transform.
Yeah. See it as an adventure. Get fucking
Exactly.
excited.
Exactly, man.
Yes.
You got to
Bring
get
it.
excited about your life,
Right.
And your life force energy and your chi and what you're actually forging and wielding in this reality field.
And remember that your biggest gains are going to come on the other side of those challenges. So if you're
Absolutely, man.
constantly going through like,
Absolutely, man. Because the breaking the stagnation is about making change to the uncomfortable paradigm and aspect.
Absolutely.
So you got to get uncomfortable sometimes.
Yep. Love it, man. Appreciate you as always, brother. And we will see you next week.
Okay. Sounds good, man. Have a great show.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, everyone. If you're enjoying the content so far, again, please hit that like. It really is the easiest and most useful way to help the channel and help this content get out there, help us grow. So a couple of quick housekeeping items to touch on, and then we're going to get into the topical discussion for the day. So quickly, let me share my screen. Shout out to the 3 patrons that are supporting us through Patreon. Oh, 4 patrons. Maybe we have a new addition that I haven't checked yet. So if I don't call out your name this time, I apologize, but I will definitely add you to the list for next week. But we have Edos Hugh, Slope Oak, and AJ Kate Green. Thank you very much for your support. Everyone, I encourage you, just check it out. It's another way you can help continue the mission. You get some nice perks here. So that link is in the link tree below. Check that out. Do follow the Wizard Factory on the social media platforms. I'm fairly active there in much more short form, daily dose type of content. And if you have not yet, I highly recommend and encourage you to check out my free initiation package, and I'll explain that here in the. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I just want to take a quick moment to offer you a special gift. It's the free initiation package download. This is a free download package that includes the Toolbox mini course. I created this package to equip you with all of the essential tools you need for any type of energetic or magical practice for anyone serious about their spiritual development. It's comprised of 3 parts: the circle, the breath, and the voice, where you'll learn how to cast the Circle of the Magi, various breathwork techniques, including a powerful guided breathwork meditation, rune galler, and more. You'll also get access to the Inner Sanctum, our private Facebook group and Discord server, as well as some Wizard Factory wallpapers for desktop and mobile, all for free. And for those who've already seen this course, I'm happy to announce that this is a brand new remake with better production and even more information. You can find the link to get yours in the description below. So check it out and let's get back to the content. I don't know how I got muted. Yeah, thanks, Leslie. If you're interested in that, here's the link of the QR code you can scan with your phone, or that is in the link in the description box down below. And one last thing, if anyone has not checked out the One Great Work Network, I'm trying to get better about talking about this more often. It's a platform that I'm on, but as well as many other, I don't know what they're up to, but at least several dozen content creators put together by Mark Passio, all under kind of one banner, one platform for the mission of spreading natural law. It's totally free. There's a constant live feed. There's all the different creators you can check out. And again, that I'm on there as well. So definitely, if you're hungry for more type truth-based content, natural law content, definitely go check that out. I think it's something that really deserves to get more attention. So that's everything I have for the quick announcements there. So let's go ahead and bring everybody on and get into our chat for today. So let's see here. Let's see if everything stays in the same order. Yes. Welcome, everyone. How are you today, you lovely people?
Hello, hello. Glad to be here.
Glad to be here.
Glad to be here.
Awesome.
Good seeing all these beautiful faces.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. So anyone watching will recognize these are the folks that joined from the previous episodes, and we're going to be kind of having a roundtable style discussion, very kind of casual and flow, and just whatever needs to come up, right? Because this is what it's about, right? We're here. We're going to have that relationship, that communication between the masculine and feminine, and try to synthesize and reconcile some of this bullshit that's not only being perpetuated in what I call top down or systematic trauma, but horizontally, as we kind of just keep running these programs and things. So, again, just to kind of set the stage, what I had in mind with this is, now that we've covered with part 1 and 2, we've covered like the unique challenges. And what I see a lot online and things, when men or women are sort of expressing themselves about these issues, it's very divided. It's very almost competitive. It's like what I like to call the victim Olympics, where everyone's sort of competing for who's more oppressed, who has it worse, and all this. So again, that's kind of what gave me the idea for this 3-part series. Is like, let's give both sides a turn to express those unique challenges, and then let's have a conversation about that and try to reconcile and shift that divided us against them mindset into like, I see you, I feel that those challenges that you go through, and I don't understand, like, we have our own challenges, you have your own challenges, and rather than use those as weapons against each other, how about using it to empathize and respect, like, that we don't truly understand that aspect, and that we all have our own shit to deal with, and us being in such war with each other is only making it worse. It's not helping anything. I mean, it's a bad situation all around. So that's pretty much the overview as far as the mindset that I wanted to get into. So, we all face different unique challenges. So, I kind of would like to start by just fielding a general question, like, what are some ways that we can focus on understanding and supporting each other instead of this constant back and forth of like, men do this and women do this, and put like kind of putting each other in these baskets, of just like blanket statements and blame and all this kind of stuff.
I have a
Whoever
thought,
wants to
actually.
go for it.
Yeah. I think that everyone yearns to be seen and heard. and understood. And, when you said the word seen, how do we see each other? I think that's really at the heart of the matter, is stepping outside of our own agenda for being seen to see and hear the other. And if both people can come together with that spirit, then there's an opportunity for both people to be seen and heard.
Mm.
And
Seek first to understand, then to be understood. That's the
yeah,
name of the game, I think. Continue. I was just want
yeah,
to
I
add
think
that
that's
in.
a good place for me to end right now.
Okay.
I would like to add, I think that conversations such as this are so critical to help us to build the capacity to have that understanding. I think it's very important with this inner work that we're encouraging is that in order to show up, for us to both be able to be seen and heard from each other, there has to be a level of inner work that we've already done to be able to be available, to be present in each moment with the other, and recognize that within ourselves, there's always a dance between union and multiplicity. And then
Mm.
when you add someone else into the mix, it amplifies that ability to recognize that there's an aspect of union and there's an action of this multiplicity, that we're respecting the other's identities. So I always try to think that we're all in this dance
Mm.
between union and multiplicity. And how do we show up within ourselves, recognizing that, so we can then cultivate that space, that spatial relationship between the masculine, to remember that as we are present within our experiences.
Well said. I love it. Yeah, having that self-knowledge is foundational. We need to understand first principles. This is, first principles of a relationship. This is what we're here to do as human beings. We are relating with each other and interacting with each other. Even the word relationship, right? If you break it up into relation, it means connection or correspondence. And then ship is it's a word forming element that means quality or condition, right? So it's not necessarily eros, romantic love. It's philos as well, brotherly and sisterly love. It's the interaction with male and female. And all relationships, doesn't matter what level it is, even if it's agape, right? It has to be based upon first principles. So this lack of knowledge that's out there that is foundational, this is what needs to be kind of discussed and touched on. So, conversations like this are vital, and the increase in conversations is definitely needed. But as one kind of increases their awareness of what humans are, what nature is, first principles, then I think we're going to start to see a huge change in platonic relationships and romantic relationships as well.
Yeah, great points so far. I love that you mentioned this balance, this dance between individual and union, because this is kind of the thing that applies across the board, even gender or sex aside. Just in terms of being an individual as well as part of a collective, much like the cells in your body are individuals, but they are part of a larger system. And one truth, so to speak, does not negate or overrule the other. And I've been really diving into psychology deeper through the perspective of mind control and things, as that's the presentation that I'm going to be presenting in next month for Funnel 3. And that's kind of one of those hallmarks about cults, is they always use the collective to override and wash out your individuality, right? Because that's what trauma does, is it fractures and stamps out your sense of self, your healthy ego. This is why there's such this almost like war against the ego. It's a lack of understanding of psychology and oneself to think that the ego is inherently bad. It's like saying, if if you have an infection in your hand, you're saying like hands are bad. No, hands are not bad. Infected hands are bad. You know what I'm saying? You need to heal that wound and bring it back into into balance and harmony with the larger system. Again, not at being at odds where you're disrupting the homeostasis of the entire system. And the other thing, real quick, to add is the idea of this conversation, right? To break down the word conversation is to change together. That's what that means etymologically. So we need to have real conversations about this divide between the men and women, not to just like say your part and project blame onto the other, but to actually listen and to actually hear the other person, not just waiting for your turn to attack and project and all of those kind of things. Because if you're only doing that, there will be no change together through that conversation.
That's the grammar stage of the trivium, right? If you infiltrate that first stage of gathering information, then the rest of it is a wrap. So yeah, really good points. I like that. Yeah.
Yes, I liked how you brought up the different types of love, Will. And I was thinking, what if every, romantic relationship focused on the agape and the filial levels of love with their partner as much as the eros? I think it would expand the perspective of who we each are in relationship to each other, and allow a compassion that's really needed and a freedom between people, because oftentimes relationships, like love relationships, get very possessive because we are investing so much of our unhealed trauma onto the other person, and that person becomes an object that reflects back our own pain and our own insecurities. So the highlight of inner work, can't be made enough, because the the awareness of our own unhealed trauma and the commitment to stay alert and aware of oneself and responsible for the flares of insecurity and pain and trauma that we have, and learn self-resourcing so that we're not projecting it all on our partner with blame and harshness.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah, the masculine and feminine need each other, but not in a codependent way, but in a interdependent way. Again, as I was just saying, trauma fractures your sense of self. Your identity becomes broken. That's why you need healing, which means to become whole again. So oftentimes, very more often than not, people get into relationships not to ascend and to serve and to grow and all this kind of thing, but rather to try to patch the holes
Mm-hmm.
that are there from those broken pieces. And like you said, that's why they're objectifying, because it's not treating them as a human. It's you're my fix, like a drug almost. It's like, I'm going to use you to complete me, because that masculine and feminine polarity within has been so disrupted. You need that. Even if you're deep, inverted, you still need that other side. That's why you get a toxic type of dynamic. Even though it's kind of polarity and both are sort of taking one side, it's still inverted, and therefore it's not, conducive to natural law and like the healthy way of interacting.
Absolutely.
It would be ideal, from what I can feel into, if we had the opportunity and availability to begin relationships from a spiritual perspective. And in fact, I've had this opportunity in my life, and it was so foreign to the how we function as a culture and within our society that it actually appeared wrong and confusing, because it was a complete inversion, but felt like the healthy inversion, but in the world was going against the grain of how we're normally taught and conditioned. And like Leslie was saying, the fact that, we, all of us have work to do, it's easy for us to get emotionally hijacked. So the powers that be, the social engineers, know how to keep us suppressed out of the spiritual nature, because that is our true power. And especially when you start unifying the correct couples who have the ability to navigate relationship where they can go through the whole pattern, meaning that a couple who is divinely paired, who's able to go through harmony, through disharmony, not get stuck in disharmony and project upon each other, but to move into repair and then back into harmony. This creates, we all know this creates power. And if people are wielding that power appropriately, you can't deny a shift in how we operate the world. So this sort of information is so important for me. I always feel like most of you often reiterate is the deep need for the self-work. So you can start to show up and be available to, number one, align with your correct beloved. Because sometimes you just cannot get back into repair and harmony again. And then you start projecting, or you're lying, or things start to fragment within the actual connection. So the first thing we need to do is, when we're ready to move out into the world with partnership, is make sure that we're rightly aligned. And that's going to take time and practice. But I don't know about you all, but I'm starting to be able to pick up on resonance very quickly now, whether or not someone else would be on the same vibrational wavelength as me, even though we were vastly different. So I'm starting to attune quicker to who is healthy for me and who do I not need to necessarily be around. So I think just this perspective and demonstrating within the world ways in which we start to see people in more of a spiritual perspective over a matter-based physical perspective. If we could somehow come together and start to normalize this in culture would have no other option but to adjust to that. There would have to be change if we rose up and demonstrated that and said we no longer operate this way, the way in which certain social engineers or companies make money off of this victim mentality. Things would have to somehow shift. And I don't know what that looks like in the long run. But from my point of view, Leslie, as you were saying, if we could start addressing people from multiple dimensions. Again, healing is becoming multidimensional, and being able to be available in different dimensions with different people and still coming from a source of love, and not having yourself getting emotionally hijacked when somebody on a lower vibration is not necessarily vibing with you. The people who have done this work, I believe, need to master the ability to not get hijacked no matter where anybody's at.
Great points.
Personal responsibility, self-rulership, all that kind of stuff. And I think it's astounding that we even have to say that a relationship should be approached as spiritual, like with a spiritual mindset, because like the fact that there's anything other than that is truly mind-blowing. That you have like that even being a spiritual person is like a thing, right? Whether you know it or not, by your very existence, you're a spiritual being. And if you don't think that, or you don't identify that, that just means you're very detached from yourself. You don't understand who you are or why you're here. And this just, again, really highlights the general lack of knowledge, lack of understanding of the occult, which is knowledge of self and knowledge of natural law. And these, especially in this context, the dynamics of gender and polarity, because you first have to master your internal polarity, and then that, by law of correspondence, projects outwards. Because even as a masculine man, if you're disconnected from your feminine heart, not like the heart which is feminine, your care, then you're going to be that's what toxic masculinity actually is masculinity that's not tethered to that feminine care, and he's acting from his wounds and his ego rather than actual genuine service as an act of love. And it works vice versa, of course. I just speaking from the male's perspective as I identify as male.
Yeah, I love what all you guys are saying. And Stephanie, I really agree with that. We need, and this is very much an animistic approach, being able to discern and read energy from all types of people on different levels, right? I mean, especially if someone is communicating knowledge and self-development, right? We need to be able to, communication is vital, right? But comprehension is key. Like, you have to have a comprehension of the knowledge you're trying to convey, but also take into consideration the receiver's ability to comprehend. So reading this energy is really valuable, discernment and versatility in our communication skills. Healing is huge. And I really love last episode that you guys touched on the family dynamic, because I think this is vital. Any topic when it comes to self-development, healing, freedom, truth, it definitely has a root in the family dynamic. This is where I see the structure is. Now we have to be honest with ourselves and understand that the majority of people, the norm nowadays, is in a co-parenting situation. So there's initiative, there's communication, there's all kinds of things. Even someone doing the shadow work as an adult should take that into consideration, that there's healing that needs to be done even with their own parents at whatever age they're at. And that is part of the deep shadow work of, really diving into that deep psychology of the anima and animus, because as a child in the formative years, we're setting the template for male and female relations, right? The relationship that a daughter has with her father
Mhm.
and son with his mother. I mean, this is going to set the tempo for relationships. So really important to kind of, even as an adult, when doing the shadow work, which is a constant journey, to take that in consideration and pursue the healing within their own family.
Yeah, really good point. Well, yeah, it brings up to a lot of points a few that I want to highlight. One is that there are skills involved in this healing work, and that skills that we're not typically taught as children, unless we're really lucky and have really aware, conscious parents, who are very intentional and have done their work. Oftentimes we're whisked through life without a lot of emotional intelligence being consciously taught to us. So we're figuring it out as we go. And we're also being born into families where there's a lot of ancestral trauma, and we are going to be interacting and learning from our own parents' imperfections and the level of their consciousness. So as we go forward and we talk about this shadow work, and what's hard about it is that our trauma creates the blind spots within us, and we don't see what we don't know is there. And I recently had a pretty profound kind of deepening of my own healing to become even more acutely aware of the childhood wound that I have been covering up throughout my life. And I'm seeing the very deep connections to that wound, to the patterns of my relationships in my life and the chaos of the relationships of my life. And so it's very profound, right? How we don't know what we don't know, and yet we know there's stuff we don't know. And we have to, I think, consciously, intentionally turn to look and ask and seek for that which is unhealed through, some self-reflection, and also connecting that what's going on in our outside world and the dynamics that we're experiencing and the people that we're attracted to and we're attracting into our life is a reflection of the wound and the unhealed. So we're given information all the time for us to process and heal, but I think our lives are so fast paced that with that fast pace, we're just operating automatically on autopilot, and we're not often taking the necessary time to do this work. So my big learning is the fast pace of life is a barrier. We need to take time, even if it's small doses every day, to look within, to be honest with ourselves. So the honesty within is first and foremost, and then equally important is the honesty with each other. And that may mean that we look and say, oh shit, like my decisions have created a train wreck, and I didn't even know myself, and I made all these decisions that have had like implications in life, and like here we are. What do we do? Trying to be loyal, but also realizing that maybe we weren't being loyal to ourselves. And so I think when we all need to say, okay, where are we now? Where am I now? And start from there with great honesty. and develop a way of the skills to be able to communicate and interact with emotional intelligence and sort it out.
Hmm. It's
Absolutely.
beautiful, Leslie.
Yeah,
That
really
that goes
great.
back to what you said earlier, right? I mean, the agape, that's the love for truth. And it's interesting, if you probably did a survey out on the street and you had people, prioritize, give me the top 5 things in your life that's most important. Yourself is probably lower at the bottom, I think the majority of people will say. But if it's not at the top and in alignment with agape, with truth, you're not gonna be a good father. You're not gonna be a good mother, or worker or driven or any of this stuff. So um, we need to focus on ourselves at all times. And I don't mean this in a self-centered way, right? I think this is probably the problem with a lot of people, that, a lot of people say, oh, well, the ego is dominant in the majority of people. I would say actually a lot of people have lack of ego. This is what
Mm,
identifies with the collective. They
Mhm.
don't have that individual essence where they're bettering themselves from that, that POV vision. Like they're not constantly looking at their own actions, their own internal ecology, and dissecting that. The bird's eye view of their daily actions and habits. So there's a lot of spiritual immaturity, and I agree with you, Logan. Everything is spiritual.
mm.
Um, so
That's the animist perspective for
Mhm.
sure. And this
yeah,
is really touching on, once again, the effects of trauma. What it does to the psychology is it polarizes your brain into a left or right hemisphere dominance of modality of operation as an executive side of the brain. And one side is masculine, one side is feminine. Not to get too into that, I want to save some for the presentation, but just in general sweeping terms, what that's going to do is push you into either a master mindset or a narcissist mindset, or the slave or victim mindset. And it leads to either an overinflated sense of ego and self-centeredness, or a like selfless, like borderless, right? The feminine, the sort of doormat archetype of the feminine, where like can't say no, always puts others first, right? No boundaries, things like that. And what people are typically going to fall, at least lean more to one side or the other. So you even see things coming out like there's sort of this surge or trend with memes and all this, like in the mental health side of things, of like, oh, put yourself first, it's okay. And I agree with that, but oftentimes I see it kind of almost leading to like the pendulum swinging all the way to the other
Mhm.
side, where it's like or like the radical honesty thing, for example. It's like people are so afraid and used to and programmed to not use their voice to actually say what they truly feel, or that they don't
Mhm.
like something, or oh, I'm ready to leave this party, or whatever it may be, to the point that then like this radical honesty comes in, to where they're not even being like caring of the other person's feelings or how they're saying something, because it's like this total opposite side of
Yeah.
the spectrum kind of thing. And it takes a
Mhm.
while, it makes sense. It takes a while to
Mhm.
calibrate. Sometimes you
Mhm.
have to be kind of clunky to that other side, but
Yeah.
eventually you need to be working towards balancing both ends. And that's really what it comes down to when you do the healing, is like I said, and others at the beginning of this talk, of balancing yourself with the collective. Like, you're important, you're valuable, but not more important or valuable than other people in the grand scheme of things. You're
Mhm.
not more of an individual than you are a human being, a part of the human family. Those things need to always be balanced and synthesized, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah.
the
There's a
alchemical
lot.
wedding.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance, and I'm listening to everything that you're saying, and like 10 things trickle downstream of multipolar traps that we could get involved in by the
Hmm.
way we're looking and where we're at amongst our process. And
Mm.
One thing I thought was so interesting, that came up, Will, when you were talking, is all of us understand this importance of truth. And I honestly feel in the collective, there's a high percentage of people who cannot see the truth. There's too much trauma and there's too many layers to where their truth at that moment actually is distant from the layers that start to come off when you heal the trauma to the authentic truth. And I think what
Mm,
happens as we start to look at ourselves, we have to go layer by layer by layer by layer by layer. And our truth, oddly, sometimes can change depending on what layer we're fully addressing.
mm,
So I actually am from the school of thought of, before we propagate, tell the truth. What's the truth? Follow your truth. Do you know what your truth is? Do you know who you are at that degree where you can show up and say an absolute truth? So for me, I just see so much nuance around what's going on collectively. And really what's sticking out with me here today with all of you is really just how evil the social engineers are, because they're aware that we're all en route and at different parts and stages of our process. And
mm,
and what I was seeing happening as you guys were talking was, Will, you had said, which I was thinking at the exact same time, is, to some people, focusing on yourself is so repulsive because it feels so selfish and self-centered depending on how they grew up.
mm,
For other people, focusing on the community, feel like you have to first be able to assess, who are you, what did you grow up with, and let me get an accurate assessment of how you think. Because I think what happens is, as we heal, the desire to polarize is very strong. So then once you polarize, you get caught in groupthink, which then blocks you from moving to your next layer. So I think there's just so much nuance that I'm seeing, and the need for maps, discussions, step-by-step processes. I mean, we're all not going to wake up perfectly overnight. And in fact, if you do it right, it's going to be a process. And I think we just have to collectively shift our mindset continuously around how we perform and do anything. As far as the family unit, Will, you were saying, I grew up in a unique environment, as we all did, but typically we're taught things to do that will cultivate safety and stability and money and happiness in the long run. Like we go on this journey where it's like, if you do this, then do this, and do this, and do this, you'll be safe. Everything will be good. You'll have a good, happy life. And then I'm comfortable because you're happy. It's like, why can't it just be, it's an adventure? Why can't it just be, we're here now, and there's going to be a lot of times where we need to work through and repair a lot. And instead of just thinking this American dream, we're going to work from here to here, that don't work. And we're afraid to even show that and be vulnerable about all the mistakes we've made, about the failed relationships we've had.
mm.
Like, personally, I've done so many things backwards. And it mostly comes from the way that I was trained collectively and conditioned through the media and television and everything else and what everybody else was doing. So again, just to reiterate back to this idea of understanding myself amongst this world, my brokenness and how I need to heal and my process, trying my best at each step to articulate that and call out my flaws, say I'm radically imperfect, but I'm trying, and I'm trying to show up with love and be better every single day. And then to dance in groups and relationships and work scenarios, which are like, you can see that more than ever now, the work environment, the toxic work environment. Nobody wants to go back to work. Here in New York City, it's insane. It's like people are still like, yeah, I can't be in the office anymore. Because we all see how toxic we are to each other now because of this time apart. But then the next step is, how do I contribute to this toxicity? Let me do my own work, so then I can reorient to find the right resonance, the energetic resonance with the right people. And hopefully I'm courageous enough to make the moves to get there.
Mm.
Yeah, the nuance is so important, but that's why the journey never stops. And it's so crazy because most people are like in the full on just binary like state of imbalance. They haven't got past stage one of even moving the needle back towards that other or direction. And then maybe that's where like a smaller group of people, they've started, like I said with the memes earlier, of like, oh, focus on yourself, boo. Like they're kind of getting there, but even that is still just the beginning. Like every time there's more nuance. It's like this fractal of the yin and the yang, and there's the dot in each side that corresponds. That's that little bit of nuance to offset it being too polarized to one side. But then if you zoom on that little dot, there's another yin yang inside of it with their own two little dots, and it's like this never ending fractal. So,
Mhm.
I just wanted to add that because, yeah, that's why the journey never stops. And most people literally haven't even taken the first step, because if all people are doing is acting out of their own trauma subconsciously, guess what that's doing? You're further traumatizing everyone else, and you're just keeping it all perpetuating. And that's what I call horizontal trauma.
You got to keep popping the bubbles. There's so many layers of healing. Say, for instance, like you said, Logan, there's a group of people who are really into self-love and taking care of yourself. Cool. Those people, go to that group dynamic and work on yourself. But don't get stuck there. Don't create that community and identity where you become that. There's another community focused on community or natural law. Okay, go do that, but keep popping your bubble. Don't
Yeah.
merge into these communities. Live in the space between these bubbles. That's where I feel like we can really elevate in our consciousness and awareness, is to say, what do I need now? Let me connect with a bunch of people who are there. Let me heal myself. Let me respect that. Let me keep that as a part of me, but continue to move on in the other aspects of myself that need further development.
Seek truth. It does not stop. This is what evolution is in the spiritual path, right? It's a corkscrew moving forward, progressing. And even in this conversation that we're having right now, I mean, we could go back and spend hours on dissecting some of the words that we're saying. So we need to like simplify the profound when we try to communicate this information to people. And of course, everyone's going to filter information through their conditioned worldview. So, that this is why starting at first principles, I mean, just look at, the definition of a woman, the definition of a man, how much bullshit that created, and how many people actually did not know this, um, on just that word, just those terms. So it's a calcification of just trauma and conditioning that needs to be chiseled off. People have their aperture is extremely tight, meaning that they can't comprehend certain information or certain knowledge because their awareness is closed up due to calcification. So it's the one great work, right? That's why it's the great work. So you get more people having these types of conversations, and doing the individual work as well. I mean, it's not about finding certain people. It's about you progressing within your own journey and expressing that in a creative way, and that resonance in the morphogenic field, in the ether, the people will come to you that have that same level of aperture, or at that same level of resonance that they're seeking, and they will come to you. So absolutely, more dialogues need to take place. And like you said, Stephanie, it is an ongoing process, and same thing with you, Logan. It's continual. It's nonstop. That's evolution.
I feel like Leslie has something to say.
Of course I do. Okay, so many points, so many great points. And I wanted to highlight, Stephanie, that sensitivity to the nuance of and the importance of assessment. That we all are we're unique, and our experience and where we stand today is going to be very unique to ourselves. And the first step is to look within and to look at our lives and to assess. And that's where I see the focus on self as being a thread that is important that we have, in that we hold on to the awareness of ourself and what's happening within us, and awareness of the context that we're in, and awareness of the people, and with sensitivity to their unique dynamics, and maybe a curiosity to understand what's going on and ask questions first, right, before we make assumptions, and to create that mapping. And so in the psychological healing work that I do with people, as a clinical social worker, I do work with people on creating a map of their own psychology, of their own selves. And then in social work, they talk about eco maps and mapping our relationship to our environment and the people within it. So there's all these layers, right, for us to explore and uncover. So the focus on self really is about awareness, honesty, and recognizing that if one person is important, we're all important, and that all our rights are equal, and that we have, in a way, we have a right to do what we want to do with our own body, as long as we're not hurting other people. But if we love ourselves, which I think ultimately is essential, if we can learn to love others, then protecting ourselves and not allowing ourselves to perpetuate dysfunctional relational patterns is important. There's a need through that awareness to be able to say, I will not continue on this path. Now, my other point around this polarity. So if we think about the line of polarity and the extremes on either side, it's very normal when we're lost. We don't really know who we are, where we are, and we have to try on a new thing. So let's say I'm a woman who's been very passive, I've sacrificed myself, and I've not developed a comfort with assertive communication. And I am trying to figure out, and I'm realizing, oh my gosh, I've sacrificed myself too much, and I need to, or I've tolerated too much, and it's time now for me to take care of myself and set a boundary. My first boundaries, my experimentation with setting those boundaries may really involve overshooting center. How am I going to know what that feels like if I don't experience on a more extreme level what it means to speak up for myself? So my first efforts at speaking up may be more extreme. They may be more aggressive, and that may bring a pushback on the other end. So there's a lot of adjustments, I think, that we make. And I wanted to normalize that process of, if we want to understand another's perspective, we need to be able to step out of wherever we're at on that continuum of polarity and perhaps try on the other side, the other extreme perspective, to actually step in with empathy and compassion to feel that other person's experience, to then understand the range of polarity, and then with proper assessment know where to go on that range. I don't know if that makes sense. We don't want to be rigid. We want to have
Yeah.
flexibility based on reality, what's happening in each individual moment in time and in dynamic among people.
This is where conversations come in, because it's like you have to first find yourself, like, okay, where do I feel like my boundary should be, putting that out there, and then being open to feedback. And that's going to tell you a lot about the other person as well. Is, are they so narcissistically inclined that any healthy boundaries is going to be an attack on them, and suddenly they're gaslighting the shit out of you, versus coming from a place of care of, like, that seems a little extreme, let's talk about it, and let I want to understand where you're coming from, but also giving you that other insight of, like, here's why I think that might be a little too far, and you might want to calibrate a little bit.
Yeah, very much. And my final word on this is that when, let's say, Logan, you come to me and you say, that seems a little extreme, but I want to understand your
Mhm.
point of view. then I have an opportunity to share my point of view and my emotional experience and the conditions, and you can understand me at a deeper level and the why I am sitting where I am. And from that place, that gives you an opportunity to just understanding and hearing
Yes.
softens my position, and I become less calcified and rigid and more willing to step toward the center to meet you because you step toward me.
And
Right?
this is the example of why you can heal in relationship. It doesn't have to
Mhm.
just be you within yourself and your little safe dojo without a sparring partner. It's like the more you're actually getting out there and having these interactions again with the right person that actually cares about you. And then, so for example, what you're saying there, then I can hear that. And by actually understanding your experience and where that's coming from, then I can even be a little bit more open to. My first impulse was that's a little extreme, but now I get where you're coming from. And if that's what you need for now to be safe, then I can be open to that, provided maybe that down the line we might adjust later, like let you have this now and give you that safety with this, but then eventually that healing is continuing on, then you can recalibrate your boundaries to a more appropriate space.
Yeah. Just like Steph said, don't stay stuck at any level. You're
Yeah,
continually.
stagnation is always spiritual death. And
Mhm.
another thing I wanted to touch on is this idea of like men and women are equal in rights, but not abilities. Because that's come up a couple of times so far in this conversation of like, respecting sovereignty of each other. That's always a universal truth, a universal right, but that doesn't mean we need to homogenize everything in the way that we're relating. And that's a big, big problem that I see in just reading threads about people and their relationships and how they do things or what they see as ideal. It's very just everything's 50-50 right down the middle, all the duties and the same communication method and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, I mean, if you can make that work, power to you, but that's not really how shit works. And again, like, learning those roles is what's going to create such better outcomes, because the woman's not trying to talk to the man the same way the man's trying to talk, because it's like everyone has their own lane, and if they're constantly bumping into each other, it's creating all this extra discord and friction, whereas the man can embody the masculine energy, which is penetrative, and the woman can embody the feminine, which is receptive. If they're both trying to penetrate each other, it's not going to go as well. But where the woman is receptive to that energy, allowing him to lead, but from a place of care, right? Not to domineer, but actually as an act of service, to allow her to relax and lean into that feminine of that softness and that openness. That's where you're going to get the best results. But it's so scary when you have all that wounding and that baggage and that trauma on both sides. It's scary for the man to lead as much as it's scary for a woman to be submissive and receptive. And that's the wounds that we need to be working on in a safe container. But just in general, I see people often very much confuse rights with abilities. And so, it's like, just even with the morality and natural law, it's like, oh well, where's your natural law when somebody's getting murdered or something like that? It's like, just because someone can do something doesn't make it morally correct. Natural law does not stop you from doing something wrong, it gives you consequences. So in that same way, you can break the rules of polarity all you want, but the consequences that you're compromising that container of man to woman the way it's meant to be in nature.
Yeah. I think that in nature pieces, there's real truth to the differences, and yet I also see that within the man and woman, there's a lot of variation
Hmm.
in the masculine, feminine, where they're standing, and especially with the environmental interferences. I think that humans are facing right now and affecting their genetics and biology. But I wanted to bring up an example. This is a concrete example in the world of physical and just kind of sport oriented. So I was an athlete. I was a Taekwondo athlete. I trained in regular dojo, and my instructor came to me and said, "You have ability. You could be national champion." And he wanted to train me. I had no idea. I didn't know I had that level of ability, but I'm like, okay, I would like to know if I have that ability. I'm going to train hard. So where I stood as a woman is for me to my natural athletic ability was different than the other women in the dojo. I had a potential athletic ability that really, for me to grow it, I needed to train with the guys. So my training for competition was with the guys because that's what pushed my edge. So I had an ability that was above average compared to other women. And so if I just trained with the women, the average woman, I wasn't going to get my ability, I wouldn't live up to my ability. So, but that doesn't mean I trained with the guys and that pushed me, or I could train with the elite women and that would push me. But where did I compete? I didn't compete in the men's competition because I didn't have, as a woman in a woman's body, I do not have the equal physical capacity as the top level man. So even though I have equal rights and I have more ability to do certain things than other women, that I have the right to choose to compete or to be a martial artist or to, use a bow and arrow or whatever I want to do. If I have that ability, right, there shouldn't be someone stopping me. And yet recognizing that equal doesn't mean that I get to go jump and compete and get killed by a guy in the ring. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Does
Yeah.
that support your point in a way? Or
Absolutely. That's a great point because I also already wanted to bring up the idea of men and women mingling sports with all of this trans stuff, and they insist that they're equal, and women can do anything a man can do. But why is it that you always hear the stories of a female to male transition going into female sports and absolutely dominating and literally breaking women's skulls in like the UFC and stuff like that. But you don't hear the other side of it. You don't hear a woman transitioning to male, going into male sports and completely dominating, because it ain't
That's because
happening.
exactly, because that's like a brick wall of truth in nature, right? It
Exactly.
ain't gonna happen. So it has to be, it's inverted. It all comes down to the inversion of nature. I mean, absolutely. And I think a lot of people inherently, that voice, we call it conscious, that voice of creation that's in us, it's deafened uh, um, by a lot of people. But we know that you can't have football league, a male football league, and throw a woman in there and have her play as a linebacker. And it's just not going to happen, right? Exactly what you were saying, Logan. A lot of people know this. So there's a deliberate attack by the social engineers. And it's just crazy what level they will take it to. And that attack on the feminine has extreme significance for just what it represents, care, and even looking at nature as a teacher, as an animist, right? It's like we understand that you have to have a man and a woman to create a child. If you disagree with that, then you are under mind control, right? It's not about being at certain levels of understanding. This is a truth that you can discover. Even looking at masculine and feminine as the elements, right? You have women, which the feminine essence is water and earth, right? Water is fluid, takes the shape of the container. Earth is what? A substrate for creation. It grows from the
Mm-hmm.
earth.
You plant your seed in it. Yeah.
That's the man. The man is air and fire. Air blows seeds. Fire actually vitalizes the earth and makes it, ready for seed, and kind of vitalizes the substrate of creation. So there's all of these examples that we can learn, and to me, this is just like arsenal of information. So when you're talking to someone, bring it back to what Leslie said, right? I mean, just by asking a few questions, you can really see what level someone is kind of at. I'm really big on the Socratic method. And then you have kind of your trajectory of where you're going to, what you're going to talk about and the information. So the reality is objective. All right. We're all living in one reality. It's not multiple realities. That's perception in the mind. We all can look at the sun and agree that's the sun. We can look at the moon and agree that's the moon. Right. So we can pull objective, singular, independent truth from our experiences in the natural world. And this is extremely powerful. But the social engineers, they understand this, and this is where the inversion takes place, right at that grammar stage.
I'd love to respond to this, Will, because this is something that I've faced within myself and struggled with a little bit at times, is that I actually believe, this is going to sound controversial, but let me explain myself, that there's a shadow side to objective and subjective reality. And how I've experienced that actually is through the lens of the medical field. Because me as a long-term patient, if I just aligned with the objectivity of scientism, I would have never been able to come with my subjective experience of natural law and healing holistically in that objective system. So I think that, yes, there's clearly a realm where this is objective, this is the truth, no question about that. But when somebody is usurping objectivity to their own benefit and not letting my holistic experience come into that realm, then I think there is a usefulness for non-traumatized subjective experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's ironically the masculine and feminine aspects. I see objectivity as masculine, subjectivity as feminine, because it's,
Yes.
truth and
It's
just
another
is
way to
what it
look
is
at it.
versus actual experience, embodiment, kind of all of that. And yes, just like masculine and feminine, those two have to go together. Truth is what it is, and that's the external part. When when truth becomes internalized, it's not truth so much as it's knowledge. That's where I like to differentiate those things. It's like knowledge is something human. Truth doesn't care what you know or don't know or think you know or believe. That's all irrelevant to what is. And your job is to align your perception subjectively. There's no other approach you can have as a human being, have an experience, than a subjective experience, aligning that as close as you humanly can to the objective truth. And there's always going to be a layer of subjectivity to that. Because again, truth is the singular thing, but yet there's infinite perspectives, and no one perspective is going to be 100% the unequivocal truth, because that's just your experience, your knowledge. Even if it's knowledge and true, it's not the truth. Nothing we can ever have it is the truth, other than just our very being. Like, we are truth, but when it comes to the mental realm, there's only that layer of that mixture of objectivity and subjectivity. And there's more than one path to truth as well, right? It's like, you want to ferment some vegetables. Well, there's no one right way to do it. It's all about the outcome. But see, that's the vegetables are the truth. Your idea about fermenting things, that's not the truth. It could be a truth, and it could have truth to it. But that's where you get into kind of like more nitty gritty about like truth just is its reality itself. And then you can, like, have layers of truth based on specificity. Is it, a building? Is it a house? Is it a red house? What size is it? Those all add to the truthfulness of a statement, but the house didn't change based on how you described it.
And
Yeah,
yet
go ahead, Leslie.
you might have the subjective, I would see, is like the decorations and the color schemes and the things that we use to beautify our experience. Almost like the fermentation is the subjective. It's the way that it's being created, and affected by us, our interaction with this object, right?
I
Through
think
our
one thing
subjective self.
Yeah, I think one thing to clarify in our community with objective reality is that absolutely that's true. But there's a lot of systems that exist, almost all of our systems in this unhealthy culture that have operated from their objective reality, which might not be the whole. So
Yes.
there is this, if
Compartmentalization almost of truth.
and then I
Partial
think what
truth.
partial truth, and then I think what happens is, let's use the medical system at large, is that they've got an objective truth of their ways and scientism, and they're not going to let in the healthy integrated subjectivity feminine in, because they know that's threatening, because then they would have to re-equalize. But they
Mhm.
will allow the toxic feminine to come in, because they know there's no true empowerment in these agendas, such as the trans and the transitioning. They know that they can't get their full power, so it's like they let that in, and
Mm,
they can capitalize. Their objectivity capitalizes off of somebody's wounded subjectivity. So the true feminine has yet to exist within healthcare yet, because then she would require him to work in harmony with her.
that's really great. Very profound point there.
Love it. Yeah, I would say absolutely. All these institutions, they have an objective agenda, I would say, right? There's
Yeah,
many
They're
that's
ways to
great.
they're
come
Yeah.
to
very left
understand
brain.
gardening. Yeah, oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
for sure. I totally agree with you, Stephanie, on that, with the feminine coming in to many of these institutions, right? Even education. So,
Hillary.
um,
The
what'd you say?
toxic I said Hillary.
Hillary.
The toxic feminine entering like political
Will, thank you
Yeah,
for
ideas.
for sure.
clearing that up for me, because watching Mark's work, your work, this community's work, the objective reality is so drilled into everybody's heads.
Mhm.
But I was experiencing something that felt, I was like, wait, this something, if I just lean into the objectivity within my work in healthcare, I'm one of them. Like that there was more to the story. And I just think that it's really important that we understand how toxic objectivity, or the agenda, like you said, the objective agenda usurps the feminine, and then
Mm.
they use the toxic feminine, the wounded feminine, who's confused about their sexuality and gender and identity because they haven't done their trauma work, and they invite them into the system,
Mm.
because
It's
they work together toxically.
It's so
Absolutely.
interesting looking at this, because I'm thinking about even this idea of relativism. That's kind of the toxic feminine as well. It's the same thing as the trans thing. It's like, oh, this is true because I feel like it's true, and no other reason than that. But and even with Mark's work, to be frank, I think sometimes I understand he wants to keep things very simple, but I think people would actually be able to grab onto it better if he acknowledged the subjective side of things, because there is a subjective and objective aspect to morality, truth as well. But morality, it's like the objective part is the bullseye right in the middle, and that's those seven deadly sins that boil down to don't steal.
Mhm.
But there's all these fringe situations and caveats and this and that, and that's what people always try to go right to when you start talking about morality is objective, and they're like, well, what about this and what about that, and let me poke all these holes in it. And it's like, but when you're stuck in that, no, it's objective, there's like these horse blinders where you can't even acknowledge that those things exist, because somehow it defeats your argument. Where I think like we need to just expand a little bit to incorporate all of that. Is
Yeah.
like, again, the outcome, the consequences are objective, and that's what makes it partly so objective. And then even with that, it's like the actions can be some gray areas, and then the outcomes will be some gray areas when you get into just like, I mean, even within those things, like, well, how do you define harm? And to what degree of harm, right? Like, oh, if I put my hand in your face, well, I'm not touching you. So technically, I'm not causing harm, even though you're kind of invading their space and they're not consenting. So, yeah, that's like right on the line. And, there can be some blurriness, but those aren't the parts we need to worry about. If we can just get those hard, objective things down, all that rest of that stuff would be like so much easier to navigate, and we'd have a lot less slavery and suffering in the world if we could just get that part right. But let's acknowledge that there are gray areas too, because it kind of becomes a self-defeating argument of just objectivists and subjectivists arguing back and forth and never acknowledging the other side. It's like,
Mhm.
Right.
oh, well, there's these gray areas, so therefore morality is subjective. Or no, I'm going to completely ignore those. It's just objective, and never like fully
Yeah.
seeing that holistic picture.
What I miss
Yeah.
from Mark's work, and I've been watching Mark low key on the DL for years, and what I miss about that, well, let me start here. What I see very clearly about Mark from a witness perspective, because I don't know him personally, but as a female, when I look at Mark and I hear him talk, I feel like there is a unified man who has very connected his masculine and inner feminine within himself and can express with objectivity, wisdom, and care. I see that there's a union with him within himself. But what I miss from the collective group is that feminine energy who's unified in herself as well. There's like an essence of, I always felt personally, this is my own self, that how I was as a woman didn't really fit in with the message, because I was feeling like there was parts of me that weren't permitted in that sort of thought process. Although many aspects of me did feel connected, part of me felt like I couldn't even be seen in this community because I'm really fully embodying not just my inner masculine and feminine, but I want to live in my feminine in this group. And there's no
Yeah.
room for me to live in my feminine in this group. And I feel that it's time, and that there's a calling to expand upon this group, to bring in women who can commune with men so the women can be in their full expression of their feminine. That's what I would love to see
I
more of.
absolutely agree. There's
This is
a
the
Interesting.
beautiful thing about the human being, right? I mean, being unified in your feminine or masculine, same thing what we were talking about with, morality and ethics, or, objective and subjective. Doesn't mean hard line, hard line. You're like that 24/7, 365. We have the ability to adapt and be versatile and pull out tools, and we have a psychological toolkit, and all kinds of things that we can utilize to our advantage, right? It would be
Yeah.
like watching Mark, and that Mark is in his day-to-day life is exactly how he is on camera, which is not the truth, right? He's very much centered and balanced as well.
Mhm.
So it is, I agree with you, using these tool sets to our advantage.
I would think that Mark is making a very conscious choice in how he's messaging. I'm sure he also gets triggered, but for the most part, he's reflected. He's making a choice, and it's a very masculine edged
Mhm.
approach.
And
And I
we were
welcome,
speaking about these pendulum swings.
yeah.
He seems to have reeled himself in a little bit as of
Hmm.
late. He's even saying that out loud. He's like, I'm going to get fired up, but I'm not going to just go unhinged like I was doing, because I think
Right.
he kind of realized it was a bit much and maybe turning some people off and stuff like that.
And I can almost guarantee that if you as gentlemen, and I know that, Will, I believe that you're partnered with somebody, and Logan, you may or may not be, but I believe
No.
truly that you men, if you were to look at a woman who was strictly in her objective nature, she would not be as attractive as a woman who was in her innocence and experience and being really fluid and open in her highest element qualities. So maybe it's just that we're missing like a female counterpart to Mark or something within, to show these levels and expressions. Because I do believe women desire to be in a space where we can provide men and the world with care, but fun and pleasure and excitement and spaces. And I want to bring this
Beauty.
up to you guys really
I
quick.
love it.
Beauty. And Leslie, we talked about that last time, about the essence of beauty. Like, why would we be doing this work if there was nothing beautiful to be working for? I think it's
Mhm.
really important that beauty is recognized for what it is. But I want to mention this too. I heard this yesterday, and I'd love to get all of your opinions. A friend of mine said, as so far as what a man should look for in a woman and what a woman should look for in a man. And I'd love to get your opinion on this because I felt it to be really beautiful. My friend said a woman should be looking for a man who is further ahead than she is in her authentic construct of her vision, that she can let him lead, but they have a similar vision, but he's further ahead than her, so she can have him lead,
He
right?
can
And
teach
then
her as well.
he can teach her, and he can lead, but they have the same unified mission, so to speak, or a generalized connection. And then what a man should look for in a woman is a woman who he would like his daughters to grow up to be like.
Mm.
Mm.
And I just wanted to get your opinion on both of those to see if how accurate that felt to you, if you wanted to like say anything about that. I thought it was pretty beautiful.
That is beautiful. Absolutely. And for the record, I'm single.
Okay.
100%. Yep.
Hello.
We're not all
Ladies out
single, are
there.
we? Leslie, are you
Leslie is
single?
in
Is this
relationship.
personal?
I
Okay.
think the rest of us are out here in the dumpster fire that is the dating world.
Yeah, I'm in relationship, but at this point, I was thinking that like Will said, that there's a toolkit that we all need to develop, and this toolkit is going to involve the comfort, the ability, the willingness to step out of our comfort zone and out of our standard way of being. And that might mean that I, in certain circumstances, got to pull on more of a masculine edge. And that may be, if I'm in relationship with my guy and he's teaching me martial arts there, or whatever it is, there may be a time when I'm standing by his side wielding our sword together with him. Okay.
Mhm.
And there may be a time when I'm back, my role in general is somewhat different. So I think we need to detach from maybe what the activity is, or that women can't do masculine things, or that's not quite the point. But there is, oh gosh, the whole question about how do we as women in this movement find our feminine expression within it? Where is our role, and how does that look? And I think that would be a fun conversation
Mm.
to have.
This is coming up in many different realms. In fact, I've been frequenting an Orthodox church, which Orthodoxy is very, very interesting. It's very ancient, very interesting. And this is coming up. Women are saying not to overrule you, but where is my part? Where am I allowed to show up and to show care? And I think this is a collective desire that women who have committed to the work and who are doing the work and have a generalized understanding is we're actually looking to the men and saying, here I am as a more a refined, distilled version of myself. What would you like me to be? And where would you like me to show up? How
That's
can I show up in a way where now we can do this together?
that's the attitude right there. Is what you're saying verbally is exactly where it is. It's not, oh, I can do this, let me do that, let me take initiative, let me be assertive. It's, here I am in all of my value, my splendor, everything that I have to offer, and he ideally truly sees you. He knows what you bring to the table, but you're trusting in his vision. Because like what you said earlier, I love that idea of like, he's further ahead, he can teach and he can lead, but their missions are the same, so that she can lean back and trust we're on the same path. I trust where he's taking us, and he doesn't have to worry about this constant push and pull about, oh well, I don't, this and that or whatever. There's that unification there. But again, it's like, it's not that submission is about just like not doing anything and just kind of like being this sack of potatoes, right? Like, that's not the point. Is like, what you're to do those things when you're led to do so. Let's just kind of get right to it. It's like, again, he knows what you bring to the table. You're trusting in his vision of where all the pieces are moving. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to cumber yourself with all of that logistics and multitasking and stuff. He's got that. And then he can call you to bring a gift or a talent or something, and step up and to do that. It's not about like what your abilities or what you can and can't do. It's just keeping that man to woman frame and trusting he will direct you to do something when it's serving the whole. I know
It's
that's
almost like
probably pretty.
forgetting rights and responsibilities for a second and just sitting in our own nature and looking at each other as man and woman and saying, do you trust me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it. Like, because we're going to do all sorts of different
Yeah.
things as far as our external. Sometimes I'll take out the garbage. Sometimes you will. We're not even talking about this. This is not even close to what we're trying to portray. I feel it's, do you trust me? And have you done enough work on yourself to trust me? And have you done enough work to know what you're doing?
Yeah. And see each other, right? Coming back, do you trust, do you see
Yeah.
me? Do you trust
Yeah.
me? How do we see and trust each other and keep the communication open, to be able to work through the various, ups and downs of that. And I wanted to add the importance I see of having a code, okay, which I would describe as natural law, the rights that we have to be free of hurtful behavior from another person, of aggression, intentional violence, those kinds of things. Because when we are dealing with very kind of volatile emotions and we're working through all these wounds and things, and we're working towards this common goal of working together in the direction of truth and sorting out our relationships, we have to have some foundational code to guide how we talk to each other, and what are the principles by which we're going to unify.
Something above
Like
us, right?
Yes.
The law that's above us.
Yeah.
like a
Yes.
constitution or a bill of rights or
Well,
something.
I'm thinking natural.
I'm just joking. Yeah.
There's nothing more powerful than a man and a woman unifying together, coming together. I mean, this is the most powerful force in this reality. Absolutely, 100%. The social engineers know this. This is why there's so much attention and time put
It's the
into
front
creating
lines.
this divide. It is on the front lines, absolutely. So not only is it the most powerful force even in a romantic relationship, where that union will actually uplift and progress evolution in both people, right? But also evolution of the species and the stewardship of the planet as well. So it's such a powerful force. It is truly beautiful. So I mean, even like, I'm not in a relationship now, but I've always known, even when I was young, that when I get into that perfect relationship or find the counterpart and unify, that not only will it will increase my individual spirituality, it would be definitely just a beautiful force. So
Union and multiplicity.
Yeah, that's
Always.
beautiful. There's also the power can be very beautiful, and it could also be very destructive if it's not wielded consciously. And that's, I think, also, what we're seeing in the modern world is this agenda to exploit lots of the power around sexuality, gender, relationship, to get all this emotional energy out there to create volatility and conflict. And that brings me back to the point of, well, what counterbalances that? How do we bring the power and direct it and funnel it into, the direction of our own health and wellness and betterment, right?
Yeah.
Leslie,
Leslie, that's so true. And there are couples who come together who, in the world of media and Hollywood, claim to be power couples, but they're actually in service to evil. So there are men and women that can come together, and so it is a hugely powerful force, and we need more sacred couples coming into union for sure.
Or being a model, being an example.
Yeah, for
Absolutely.
sure. Absolutely. That's setting the tone for the children, right? For sure. I think what you said early on, Logan, right? I mean, this is one of the big problems, is that people are using relationships due to their lack of knowledge of self. They're using it as a Band-Aid. Get out of a toxic relationship, hop right back into another one, right? They're projecting their trauma on there.
Right.
So, and that this cycle continues and continues.
Being single highlights their utter brokenness and incompleteness, and they can't stand it. I mean, people these days can't even be alone with their own thoughts or sit in a quiet room. They got to be on their phone or something to distract them from all that internal chaos. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that
Huge
relationships
point.
nowadays are the ultimate drug, the ultimate heroin, the ultimate escape and bypassing of that inner work
Codependency.
that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Online
I'll
dating
second
doesn't
that.
make it easy, right? It actually speeds
No.
the process up.
Oh
Yep.
God.
So,
Yeah. Speed dating,
speed
swipe right.
dating.
I don't know if you guys experience this, but in relation to the chakra system, I had to really do work and move myself up the ladder, Jacob's ladder, right? And hit that awareness of the spiritual realms. And I had to overcome a lot to really be connected spiritually. And one thing I had to overcome was this lower nature of my anima, the lower nature of it, overcoming sexuality that's not divine, overcoming aspects of myself where I was seeing I was getting caught. And like I said, you can see how society and culture has so strategically, I don't know, just plugged in
Hmm.
trap between like every chakra system. It's like trap. Let me try to give you all of the things that are going to keep you stuck in that, and I'm going to capitalize off of you. So it really is an incredible, the hardest journey I've ever taken. I could have never imagined that I would be on this journey. It supersedes anything else I've really experienced. But I know in my heart it's a gift to be on it, and I'll always commit to it. But it is one thing where you're constantly having to overcome the lower nature, but then re-embody back to be fully present on earth, and to be able to have, Will, you said so graciously, simple conversations that don't always have to be so complex with people who don't know anything about this. How do you
Mhm.
become so basic yet so still connected to the spiritual realm? It's like stretching ourselves like a rubber band. Like, how can we really fully express but be super innocent and honest and grounded at the same time?
To be
It's hard.
truly
Yeah.
integrated. That's what I would say, is
Yeah.
to truly embody that, to truly be integrated, and then to understand yourself and these operational dynamics so well that you can, as Will beautifully puts it, simplify the profound. You know what I mean? Just condense it down into a simple way. When Stephanie, you and I, we were having a private conversation, that really struck me what you said about, remember, like, what we're talking about here is very, very advanced. And I'm like, yeah, I think I take that for granted sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
mean to sound pretentious or something like that, but I do have a natural just ability to grasp the nuance of things and like see that high level thing. But then I get so far up there in the clouds that I kind of almost lose that ability to take it back to like explaining it to someone as if they've never heard it
Mhm.
before, or trying to expect them to be able to just grab right onto some calculus when they don't even know basic algebra. Right. You have to start with those building blocks and go from there. You can't just jump all the way right there. There's prerequisite courses that you have to take.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's like Mark says, like, I think that every one of us could potentially embody a teacher's teacher in this sort of information, like a track to appeal to that teacher's teacher mentality. But how do you still stay completely connected to the 5-year-old on the street who knows nothing about this, and you're trying to be with them in this state of truth and wisdom, right? And it's complicated. And for me, the more information that I was able to integrate and the more opportunities I had within the world, the more I had to look at myself and my own ego and keep setting myself straight and looking in the mirror and saying, like, where are you bullshitting yourself? Where are you getting higher on your own supply? Cut it out, cut it out, cut it out, cut it out. And keep myself hopefully in some state of balance, because again, even people like us, we know this, you start to get that wisdom and then you fly up, and there are teachers I like and I respect, but you can barely understand what they're talking about, or they're so insulary in their group now that they're losing connection with the whole. So it's just a constant work in process. But I think I don't know if it's Einstein, but somebody said the true active genius is somebody who can take something complex and explain it to a 5-year-old.
Yep.
And I think that's been a lot of my work is, okay, I've got all this really cool wisdom that I love to talk about, but how do I keep it accessible so everybody feels like it's for them?
If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Socrates.
Yes.
Socrates, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can 100% relate to what you're saying. It's 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Even the allegory, the Matrix, right? Neo, through his will, wakes himself up to unplug from the Matrix, yet still goes back into the Matrix to try to influence and create change. So we're kind of doing that dynamic. I mean, I'm a father. The greatest duty, I don't want my daughter to memorize information that I'm talking about. I want her to understand it and
Right.
discover it for herself. So there is that, there's that process of kind of not dumbing it down, but distilling the information into practical means where it's applicable in the real world and people can see the correspondence. I'm real big on correspondence. This is part of the animist mindset, and you can see it within your own life and your own psyche in the natural world. This is how we can truly kind of embody knowledge and truth.
Yeah. And when you're really living the commitment, that resonates from somebody. You can really, I know we're conditioned, like the first 2 to 5 minutes we meet somebody, we already have preconceived judgments and notions about what we like and don't like about them. That's the nature of humans. But I've experienced, as I develop, I can meet somebody and in a very short period of time, I can feel that resonance of like, you're like me, no matter what level you're at. It's like I'm tapping into like their heart or something, or their soul or their spirit. And I'm like, I see you, even though we're barely talking, I see you. And we can, really, really work together or learn from each other. I don't know if you guys feel that, but this resonance is really starting to become so powerful within me where you don't even need to say much. I'm like, oh, you're like me. Like there's something I can't describe. And I'm like, you're like me. I feel it.
You're reading the morphogenic field, that field of consciousness and information. And you're able to read into that, really good. So
It's the difference between embodying and intellectualizing also, this embodiment of principles and living it experientially has a resonance and a vibration that then others will feel. And that I think is where the power lies, more so than just the intellectual, teaching of things. And I think that we can take this idea to go the next level of how we interact with each other, in network, and then also how we interact with mainstream people, that we hold on to the subjectivity. Because if we're too rigid in the objective principles and we just start, yelling those out, hitting our head against the wall, we get frustrated. And it's our frustration and the resentment and those things that are going to be felt, and how we are being experienced and with each other. So how can we come back and embody the principles and also the subjective sensitivity of the feminine with, the empathy and the compassion and the using appropriate forgiveness and humanness, right? Yeah, go out there with
Leslie,
yeah.
I'd love to add on to what you're saying is I read something once and they were saying that the masculine energy, the intellectualization, the masculine energy is the scientist. He's the one who studies and tries to get the knowledge out and across. And what is
Identifying
he?
patterns.
Right. What is he studying? He's studying her. He's studying the experience, the one living it, and he's observing, right? It's like, it makes me almost feel to some of the taboos we have, like voyeurism or like certain aspects of like, I'm watching her, right? Like I'm like, look at her. Like I'm so visual. I'm watching her. I'm studying her. I'm trying to figure out how to work with her. And to me, that's what you're saying, Leslie. It reminds me of like the intellectual, like the blend of truth and beauty, or like love and wisdom. It's like this
Mm.
these two things. And to me, a spiritual relationship feels like the extreme polarity being having room to coexist together. Not having someone like maybe a soulmate who's like exactly like you. It's like really actually it's complicated because they're your divine opposite. They're your each other's feedback loops. So it's something that's like this beautiful dance of the extremes of what you fully can be, and to be safe to do that, because individually we're kind of doing that dance within. So then it's like, how do I trust enough to take myself, who's done all this work and I'm really balanced, and now I'm going to introduce someone else into my life, and how do I completely surrender this into like, okay, I'm going to go into my full feminine because I trust you after I just did all this work to get here.
Yeah.
And
I
then there's
always
room for
visualize
play. Yeah.
I always visualize, maybe it's kind of cheesy, but when I think about polarity and that trust that's required, it's like where you grab each other's hands and you start leaning back and sort of spinning. It's like if the other person let go, you'd both just go flying. So it takes that complicit trust to just like lean back and embrace that circling kind of action. Yeah.
Yeah.
And once you master that energy and it's conscious within yourself and between each other, there's a lot of creative potential there and how you work with that energy and play with it and create different patterns and
Yeah.
interactions of that energy. And as long as that
Yeah.
is mutual and conscious, and I guess, and if we're going to think about the masculine feminine is the root, right, at the foundation, that is in balance, then how individuals play with that is pretty infinite.
Leslie, you just really lit this insight within me. I was imagining us leaning back into the polarity, right? And we talk about like what does a man and woman, I don't know, at least for me, what do I love to do with a man? Sorry, this sounds very bad. But play, banter, go back and forth and just play and
Right.
trust and play. And if we really lean back into we surrender and lean back in the relationship into our masculine and feminine, look at all this space to
Yeah.
create, to
Mhm.
play. It's the field. It's the
Yes.
field. It's like now all of a sudden I'm connected to the field where there's everything's possible because we're so leaned back. We're not like in on each other, non-trusting like this with no space.
Yes.
You gain
That's
momentum,
the
right?
leaning back. I love that. Yeah.
That'll increase
Yeah.
momentum. I love it. Great points.
Yeah.
What do they say? A man can build a house, but a woman can make it a home.
Yes,
A
exactly.
woman gives her heart, and a man keeps it safe. Like all
Yeah.
all these like quotes, we
Yeah.
can. I mean, why do even observing animals? I was raised on a ranch, so I could see the turkeys, how the male turkeys they chase the female, and the birds fly around and do this dance. It's all part of mating and stuff like that. It's mind blowing. But one thing I wanted to say, what you mentioned, Stephanie, about the chakra system is I definitely can relate to that, especially within the last few years of overcoming the lower chakras. I mean, getting into a relationship in the future for me, I mean, it's got to be up there. It's got to be based in principles first and foremost,
Mhm.
right? And there's nothing more attractive to me about a woman than the mental and emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
So it's like for most men, I mean, I got buddies now. It's like, oh, she's got 2 arms and 2 legs. I'm good with that. And they're at that lower chakra system, but
Mhm.
had that connection is just it's profound, and that's what needs to be met. So aligning with principles, I think, is something that people should consider doing for sure.
It's
First,
hard
ask
to.
yourself what principles do you think you understand about yourself and know.
Yeah, I think it's hard to believe that there's something greater than sex. I
Well,
think it's really hard to believe that.
the
And
irony is that
yeah,
it is sex. It's just energetic sexuality rather than two bodies banging together.
right. Now I will say, don't get me wrong, if you can blend the physical with the
Yes.
energetic, bam,
Mm,
you got your divine counterpart. But let's not jump the gun here, right? It's like first, I think overcoming the lower nature and getting the energy on board. Because I'm telling you, I mean, the amount of people addicted to porn, men and women, and just checking out from their sexual connection, all your power is in that intimate union and that energy that you guys share together. So it's a lot of work that we have to do to overcome that. I mean, I'm not a man, obviously, but you know, that's something even I had to look at, and I can imagine for many men, it's very difficult. But if you can work to overcome that, there actually is something even better on the other side of that.
What that was coming up for me is this idea of like the order of operations, right? The spiritual is the plane of causality. The physical is where things manifest, the plane of effects. So if you have to start with that connection in the spiritual aspect and let that trickle down and express itself through physical union as well as an extension of that higher connection rather than
Yeah.
just at that base layer.
So, you know what's so interesting is the New Age community, right? We always say New Age BS. There's a lot of things within the New Age that were on the right track and then
Yeah.
it just fragmented. So, a New Age teaches ascension, moving up the chakra system and then somehow flying into outer space with your community of the galactic force and having to come back down. So,
Yeah.
actually, it's like this dissension now. We're in the point of like we've gone up, we've become aware. Now, how do I start from the true hierarchy, the spiritual hierarchy, and work my way down and
Mm.
live in these different dimensions rather than starting from the ground and somehow working your way up?
It ties into what we were talking earlier about how it's some people need to focus more on themselves as
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah, yeah,
from the martyr perspective. Other
yeah,
people need
right.
to like be a little less selfish. It's like if you have to navigate somewhere, the first thing you need to know is, where am I? How am I going to get somewhere and know how to
You
get
are
there
here.
if I don't even know where I'm starting from? And that's the thing, is like, balancing these things out. It's first learning, where am I on this pendulum, on this spectrum, and then where am I trying to get to, and make sure, if past the stop sign, you've gone too far. I need to turn back around and backtrack a little bit.
Yeah, it's like where am I? Like you see on a
Yes,
map, you
you
are
are here.
here. But then it's also like, where do you think you're at?
Yeah, yeah.
Actually,
Well,
I think
That's
I'm
very
over
good way.
true.
here.
That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great. And that the question of, where are you? Where am I? Start from where you are. That's a foundational principle that I learned in, for their doing mental health work and counseling and social work. You
Mhm.
start where every person is. That's the only
Assessment.
starting place,
Yeah.
you know?
So as we're getting later in this episode, let's pivot towards kind of like the healing and the rift, bridging. First, like, how would you say healing is different for men and women? Because again, let's not homogenize everything. Healing is important, but and there's of course some universal principles when it comes to healing. But how would you say healing is different?
I think women are naturally more in the subjective and already more versed in emotional experience and communication, and perhaps more culturally conditioned to share and those kinds of things. And I think that gives a little bit of an advantage for that part of it. And yet, for most women, it's the lack of boundaries. It's that those masculine aspects
Or
to strengthen,
objectivity.
right? The objectivity,
Yeah,
right? And then sort of the opposite in a way for men. So there's
great
almost,
point.
that's
I
stereotypical, obviously.
That's fine.
I think for the healing of the feminine for me, very personally, it looked like me embracing my spiritual journey and forgiving all of the men within my
Yes.
life, including the collective masculine, including
Your
the evil that
parents.
we have in the world. It's like I had to start with a blank slate. If I was bringing in any toxic energy, I couldn't see as clearly as I wanted to see. So I had to really forgive everybody, especially the male energy that affected my life, that energy that, as Leslie said, somehow made me feel unseen, unheard, underappreciated,
Mm.
undervalued for who I am innately as a woman. So that was the first thing I had to do, was forgive that. And then on my spiritual journey, I had to find that self-sourcing within myself to realize I am looking outside of myself as the subject. I'm looking out as who's witnessing me and judging them. And rather than looking out for my approval, I have to realize that I am never an object before consciousness. I am never an object before my own awareness. And once I started to really, really believe that I'm not just an object, I'm not just something to be objectified. Once I had that fully within myself, then as I was looking out, I could see the people looking back at me who wanted to objectify me. And I could start to see the people looking back at me who saw me more for who I really was. And that really cultivated me shape shifting my environment and the people that I have within my life, was to
Mhm.
consciously choose the people who had the ability to see me beyond just an object.
Let's talk about forgiveness really quick, because I think that is so, so key in this particular conversation here. As you know, as I laid out when I first was laying out the whole mindset about how I came up with the idea for this series, is like we're just always projecting these past traumatic experiences on people that haven't done those things. They probably maybe they won't do those things, and so forgiveness is key, but what does that really mean? Because especially to a traumatized, wounded person, forgiveness sounds so not fair, right? Why should I forgive them? They did this, they did that. To forgive is not the same as excusing, right? If you forgive them, that doesn't mean, oh, it's okay. No, it's not okay. You're still acknowledging. That's the first stage of, you actually have to be a victim before you can let go of the victim mindset, is acknowledge, okay, this happened to me. It was not fucking okay. Period. I was victimized. Acknowledge that truth objectively. But then you let that go. You can't stay in that. That's where it starts becoming toxic, because as we've talked about, stagnation is toxicity. So it's not that you are saying it's okay, you're not excusing them, and you don't even do it for them. That's the thing. You do it for you, because you can't keep carrying that. It's only hurting you. It's holding that grudge. It's not hurting that person. They probably don't, they maybe don't even think about you anymore. So it's like the whole forgive and forget thing. Like, forgive but never forget. That's how I think is a fair balance, to like learn, from those experiences, so that the warning signs and the red flags that people are so notorious for ignoring. That's why I see all these memes about like red flags and stuff, right? Like, learn from that experience, but don't come to expect that same behavior from people. Give them the benefit of the doubt and let them show you who they are, because the more you're projecting what you think based on your past traumas, the more that's actually what you're just going to attract. You assume this is how men are. These are the only kind of men that are interested in me, blah, blah, blah. That's your story. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It just keeps attracting that type of person. But when you let that go, that energy is not polluting your field anymore. It's not part of what you're calling in, especially as a woman, where her power is magnetism to attract. Then that's so, so important, is forgiveness for yourself, not the other person. You're not excusing them. You're just taking your power back, because when you hold that pain and that blame, you're giving them the power. They did this. They made me feel this way. But so when you forgive, you're letting that go, and you're taking that power back of, they can't make me feel anything that I'm not choosing for myself. Anyway.
Yeah. I think what you're talking about is like releasing resentment
Yeah.
and recognizing that when we're holding on to the wounds and the hurts from previous, traumas or hardships, that if we carry that forward, it's going to affect our mindset and our view of ourself and our view of others and our view of the world. So our worldview and our ultimate belief about ourselves. And if we're stuck in resentment, then that means on some level our self-identity has to do with being hurt or being, less than, or a victim, or whatever it might be. And so coming back to that self-assessment of where am I? Where am I holding resentments? What is the clearing work and that I need to do so that I'm not taking this poisonous script into the next relationship? And then when we're in relationship, when we're in the boxing, arena, and somebody does something that then it pulls the string of a past wound, and we could have all these feelings come up and project them onto this current partner, when really it's feeling so big because it's reminding us of a past wound that we haven't cleared. And so when we have that self-awareness and we can say, oh, I have been triggered, I am in a wounded place, let me see this for what it is and where the source and cause is, do the clearing work, and then come forward to a place of more of a purity in the present moment relation with another person. Now we're dealing with wounded people. We're all wounded to some degree. We've all been living in trauma. So when we understand that and we accept that we're stepping in and we may have high ideals, but yet someone is inevitably going to falter, and we may need to do this process of repair and begin again over and over. And I see that forgiveness falls somewhere in there. It's like, you made a mistake, it hurt me. We are doing this alchemical process of communication and release to begin again from a new understanding and agreement based in love. I wanted to highlight the podcast that I'm doing with Derek Bartolicelli called Dissolving the Divide, and just refer people to some of the interviews that we did there that really pertain to a lot of the things we've talked about today. Shadical Hargrave, Chad, we did a really good interview with him about forgiveness that I think was
Nice.
really expanded my understanding of forgiveness and how really key this is, and how he clearly articulates it in relationship to natural law. So we're not forgiving at the expense of natural law of right and wrong. There's an ability to embrace hurt and wounding and wrongdoing and compassion and release resentment. And it's like this process of releasing the resentment over and over and over again that allows us to expand more into love and into wholeness, to begin again towards what we all are seeking. I think that the resentment and the lack of forgiveness keeps us stuck in stagnation.
If for a moment I could just take what Leslie said and share it from a different perspective, is I think that most of us have felt what it's like to be in what's called the 0 point, or a balanced point of energy, where you're co-creating and you're working and you're like, oh, everything's good, everything's in alignment, look at where I'm going, everything feels great. And then all of a sudden one day rolls around and you're like, shit, what happened? Everything was going so great and just falling into place and everything was really effortless. And now all of a sudden I found myself in a different space. So how I kind of look at this, and this idea of forgiveness, is that I'm working towards getting to work with the quantum field more organically, because I see that's where we create. So I want to be in that place of balance where I'm not bringing my baggage, so I can contribute to creating more service for the world. That's what I really, really desire in my heart. So when I've missed the mark, or I've gotten caught in an old pattern, that represents for me as those circumstances where I say to myself, what the hell just happened? Now things have stopped, slowed down, reversed, everything was going. So instead of randomizing it, now my pattern for myself is to recognize I've missed the mark because I've gotten far away from my 0 point, from my creative field where I feel like I'm balanced and happy and am projecting love in the world. And I feel that people's true natures are only ever seen from the availability of love. So when we're projecting If we're angry, frustrated, projecting, we have to realize our part and why we keep ordering that on our menu. Why do we keep ordering that kind of behavior? And yes, there's an objective reality that certain evil exists in certain realms. But as so far as this kind of work and us trying to move the needle, there's other places where we can try to focus on where we're really seeing each other and contributing from this respectful, loving energy. So for me, when I miss the mark, when I feel like, what the fuck happened, or what's going on, or look at that asshole out there, I come back to myself and forgive myself for somehow missing the mark, not realizing something was happening or not addressing something. Forgive myself that I was missing the mark. And then I attempt to go back out in the love with the empty quantum field, the space. Let me just show up with the space. If I bring any bullshit, anybody else's bullshit into my space, it's going to affect my productivity of how I provide service in the world. And this is really hard to work with, but that's the forgiveness and the work I do on myself. So rather than so much worrying about forgiving other people at this stage, that was a huge part of my process. But at this stage, when I'm projecting onto someone else, where I feel the need to kind of forgive, I kind of just come back and say, am I projecting? Have I missed the mark? Because now I'm not seeing in love anymore. I'm seeing all sorts of other stuff in my field. And why is that? Am I looking there? Am I continuing to show up in that space? So it's kind of just, again, this constant, as I'm playing in the world and forgiving people and remembering memories from my past where people wronged me. I get it. Like, so much shit has happened, right? But now, from now, this point forward, like Rodney was saying, like this is a choice point for us right now. Is can we just see more broadly with what has happened within the traumas of our own lives? We've all been traumatized. We all have it. We can see it playing out now. We have that eagle eye vision to see it going on. How can we just day to day kind of commit to just showing up with the space? Let me just show up with nothing. I'm not bringing any baggage with me. Nothing. I'm empty. I'm an empty vessel.
Equanimity.
Yeah.
I want to add something to that as well, and then I'm sure Will has something to add. Give him a chance to talk. But I'm so glad you brought that up, Stephanie, because I was definitely had just written a point to touch on the importance of personal responsibility with this, because this is really what you see. Like I said, when you see this stuff online and you're reading threads about relationship stuff, and that it's always the other person. They did this, they were a psycho, they were a narcissist, whatever. And those things may be true. There's nothing wrong with that assessment, but your focus should be yourself and what role did you play in co-creating that experience, that situation, because that's the part that matters most to you, right? It's like you can't control what other people do, but you can control yourself. And if that was allowed to happen, especially if it seems like some kind of pattern in your past, there's something more to that than, oh, you're just the unluckiest person in the world. You just keep getting these duds and these abusers, and oh gosh, how does that keep happening? Well, what's the common denominator in all of those situations? And that's not to make you feel bad, or it's not, is a balance. You have to acknowledge that personal responsibility and that you had some role in that, but also that that's okay. Forgive yourself. Like you said, Stephanie, thank you for bringing that feminine touch, because I kind of sometimes forget that, even just in general on this show. I'm always about personal responsibility, and that's true, but be gentle with yourself as well. Be compassionate for yourself and just say it's okay. Every day is a new day. I can learn from these mistakes and do better next time, and that's the whole name of the game. So really, take personal responsibility and ask yourself, what is it about that I'm doing that is misaligned, that's bringing this on myself? Because it's probably something to do with your self-worth. That's what majority of the time it is, either masculine self-worth or feminine self-worth, which are different, but yet still central and have like universal aspects to them that make them the same, but they show up differently and they're expressed differently. But like for example, having boundaries internally as a feminine is healthy, so that you're not so that you those alarm bells go off in your head when you start seeing those red flags, and you're like, something's off here. Because if you've been through it, especially, it always starts with the small stuff. First they're getting angry, and then they're punching walls, and then they're punching you. They don't just start right off the bat with that, right? So seeing those things early, recognizing them, and having the self-worth to know, what, this is not going to work for me, right? And just flowing away. If you're the feminine, the masculine should be setting boundaries and asserting boundaries. The feminine has internal boundaries, but the feminine to assert boundaries is putting her in her masculine, and that shouldn't even happen. If you're having to set boundaries with a guy, you're already off on the wrong foot, because you can't trust him to set his own boundaries and lead himself if he's doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable. So, anyways, to tie it all together, it's your self-worth, and then how you're expressing through polarity, how you're communicating, those kind of things. It's always the internal world where it starts, and then that expression outwards through correspondence. Excuse me.
Excellent. Yeah, I like to, when I think about forgiveness, right? Even the word forgiveness means pardon, to pardon, to forgive. I look at more of as like a release or let go, meaning that you're going to have some traumas that happen to you, childhood trauma, right? That may not be your fault, but your responsibility to heal. You could be in a relationship. I've been in, an extremely horrible, toxic relationship, and absolutely, I have to take accountability and personal responsibility. But instead of forgiving the other person, it's more about taking inventory on the lessons that I've learned and release that negative energy, accept those dark times, and I promote conscious death, meaning that the person that I was mentally, psychologically, emotionally then is now dead. Now I am a new person with those lessons in hand. If you're not learning the lessons, then you're in what? A feedback loop, right? You're going to continue the issues, learning lessons within yourself, and looking out for those red flags. So that's kind of how I look at forgiveness. In a narcissistic culture world, right? Institutions promote narcissism. You're not going to get a sorry. You're not going to get any kind of empathy from that. So you have to work through that within yourselves. Even if someone says sorry, hey, sorry, I was an asshole in this relationship. That still doesn't really mean anything to you unless you integrate the work, right? You actually have to understand that and integrate that and move forward and evolve. So, yeah, something to chew on. I wanted to say on healing too, especially as a man. For me, healing the anima, meaning my relationship with my mother. I was fortunate to have a stepmother since I was 3, so I had that mother figure there. But my birth mom was gone all the time, and then interjected back into my adult life, and the relationship was rocky. So I have to heal that. I think a lot of people might not think, well, I just had a normal childhood. Normal doesn't exist. Like we said earlier, we're having a subjective experience in an objective reality. Everyone's experience is different. So looking at that relationship with my birth mother and healing from that was really important. And as a man, mastering those lower chakras of the animalistic base consciousness, and understanding that occultism, that hidden knowledge there, that it's not just sex, it's energy exchange. You are taking energy with you. So you're taking, you can get deep into it. You're taking attachments and all this kind of shit that can have an effect on your whole field. So conquering those lower chakras, lower realms, base consciousness, I think is important for healing to become whole.
I think that's so profoundly necessary for our young men and children in today's age. And I'm hoping that somebody is working on exactly what you just said, which is overcoming the lower masculine nature. Women have it differently, but I guess I'm referring to a lot of the sexuality and things like that. And as a woman, I can't speak exactly to that, but it feels so important to me.
I would
Base
say
consciousness.
I would say for young ladies, young women, what is like, porn for men, right? I mean, it's detrimental, but also the attention from social media for the women. This
Mm,
is what,
Mhm.
the TikTok, the likes, I mean, all this kind of OnlyFans, this kind of shit, right? This is what
Mhm.
feeds that
mm.
unhealthy animus for the ladies.
That's
Yeah.
really hitting me because uh, to understand the masculine and feminine, you have to understand what each of their most fundamental needs is. And the feminine's most fundamental need is to be cherished. So if she's not valued, if the feminine
To be
itself is
served.
not value, which it's not in our society, then that's what's driving that behavior, that they need to be seen so bad that they'll go to that links to get it in a toxic way.
Yeah.
And then the TikTok and all that leads to OnlyFans and then so on and so forth. It just spirals out because it's not authentic.
Yeah.
If you look at women that are like really stuck, they have their animus possession is just on fire, right? I would bet, I would guarantee that it is a direct reflection on the relationship between her and her father. Same
Sure.
thing, just like we talked
Yep.
about earlier with anima and
Mhm.
animus. It's so profound when you dive into that psychology, and then you see it in the world. Yeah,
It's
Yeah,
another correspondence.
yes,
yeah, and
very
as a
much.
woman who's I don't know, I've had to side more on the masculine aspects in many ways in my life, and felt exhausted by that. And for me, the healing is coming from releasing the need to have like a lot of ambition, really. I mean, ironically, even I'm doing more than ever, but I kind of am more detached from the outcome and from
Yes.
seeing myself as the leader of it necessarily. And I want to more and more just settle into the feminine aspects of myself, which in our society today, the false toxic feminine is promoted, but there isn't a lot of space or even an understanding or awareness of what it means to just sort of relax into and know and listen to the voice within, right, and flow. It's counter to our society the way it's set up, but that is this my path to healing.
What's
Mm.
very interesting, Leslie, is there is a demographic that really embraces this idealism of the woman as let's say a homemaker or surrendering to her feminine, and that's in certain religious communities. But now they kind of usurp that, and sometimes that looks unhealthy as well. But there is something that's very because I think it's like it's ancient, it's old, it's the way that we're naturally built to be. There's a respect towards the woman being a homemaker, so to speak. And religion aside, is that I have that same desire. Now, Leslie, you and I are middle-aged women, I would assume, right? So, and we've both been through a gamut of, I'm sure, relationship and trauma and healing. And because culture is set up so predominantly to be suited towards what would be called the unhealthy patriarchy, there are women who have been on this healing journey. And I kind of feel like men as well, but I would love your opinion is I'm yearning to fall into my role. There's a desire and a yearning to surrender, to really be in that and not do anything, not be a homemaker or have a ton of kids, but to really relax and to
Mm-hmm.
start to shift the dynamic from chronic healing to a little
Yeah.
more play
Yeah.
integrated into my healing process. I'm craving playfulness and innocence and the like, for us to not demonize words like purity. I think that even the word purity has gotten demonized. It's like, oh well, Germany, Hitler was based off of purity, and this was based off of purity. But actually, I think there is a light side to us desiring to try to be pure and to be innocent again, like a revisiting of just innocence without all of the freaking baggage. So I have that same desire is, I'd like to be able to soften even more and to really just relax into the rest of my life. Still working on that, but it is a yearning that I have, and it's not something at all that I perceive as weakness. And in fact, women like you and I often maybe get perceived as being bad feminists, right? Because we're saying that we're going back to this agenda of actually, I want the traditional roles in my life. I can honor and respect the essence of what a traditional masculine and feminine can bring together in relationship.
And I just add that going to the place where that feminine kind of social role is embraced, and voluntary and supported, supporting a woman in her whole range of her strengths and abilities, and honoring her choice to take a more traditional role. What I see is that women who are choosing more traditional roles are having almost a defensiveness around that to justify that it's not an offense in some way to the feminist movement. And we don't want to go back in time to the 50s because those weren't the healthy dynamics, right? What we want is a new creation. We want something we've never experienced as a humanity before. I think that's really important to point out.
That's a good point. Even a lot of topics that I discuss with people, even freedom or animism, paganism, people have a hard time with actually using the imagination and seeing forward. They always revert to the past, right? Like, should we get rid of the grid and no more TVs or cars or, shit like that. Like, it's like, no. Like, it's not reverting back to the past. Like, we're going forward. We're learning the lessons and moving forward. And this is, people have a hard time with this. I think that's, a lot has to do with just the deadening of imagination and the deafening of care of the heart space.
The polarities that are happening, polarizations.
Exactly.
Choosing extremes.
Yeah, and I also think too that we have a disease of one-dimensional thinking.
Yeah.
And it's like it's this or that. Everything's binary, and you have to do the work enough to be able to broaden that. It's not just one way. You have to be able to see the levels, the layers, and to say, actually, there may be a time in history where these sorts of dynamics worked, but I think there was some dysfunction around it, or we can improve upon it. So let's take what works and let's re-implement it into our society now with what we know. So it just requires to think on more dimensions than just one.
And right brain simultaneously. That's the key, and that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Because you have to use the past as a useful precedent of, well, these were the conditions that did play out objectively, so we can look at that as a test study. But the future is unwritten, so you're not just trying to repeat the past over and over again. It's take the parts that worked and move that forward, but change some variables to get a better outcome. And that's that subjectivity adding in. It's, combining linear thinking from complete, holistic kind of open, free associative thought and stuff.
And when I think of the interference theory, that gives me the perspective that's needed here to realize how brand new, what we need to create is. We've been programmed and indoctrinated since the beginning of time.
And I'm not so sure that our history is actually super accurate. So in demonizing like what went on in the past, actually, I'm questioning how true that is at this point in my life.
Yes.
Maybe it was pretty freaking good. Maybe men and women did great, and it was hijacked. I don't know.
It could
but
be.
I'm trying to, broaden my thinking on it.
people trying to oversimplify things. It's ironic. We've been talking a lot about overcomplication, but you can oversimplify things as well. And if you're looking back at history, there's so many. I mean, countless amounts of stories of individual experiences and people doing different things. That's what you get when you have free will. Is it's kind of unpredictable in certain ways, and you can't just make blanket statements about how people were in the past. If anything, they're relatively true observations about kind of like a good enough majority to constitute making a statement, but there's always a spectrum, and some people might have been completely different than what you're reporting. Or like, for example, people think of pagans were just these brutal savages and godless barbarians or whatever have you, and yes, those did exist, and you can look at stories of that, but that doesn't represent what all pagans were behaving like, or that they didn't understand natural law or objective morality or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good to question everything.
What I miss?
Well, I was
I
talking
had to
about
take a wiki leak. Sorry.
I was talking about blanket statements about history and
Yeah.
how there's always fringe aspects of things, and then I used paganism as an anecdote. Like, people tend to think of pagans were just barbarians or violent or were out Viking or whatever, and that doesn't represent all pagans. Like,
Yep.
there were those, but there were also perfectly moral, peaceful ones as well.
Yeah, that we don't have an accurate account of history, really. We don't know.
Well, and it was in the writers of history's best interest to make them look super bad, because now we have Christianity and it's so civilized, and we've civilized the world and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Ah.
Great conversation, ladies and gentlemen. It's been really great. Definitely doing okay on time here. I mean, I think we could keep going, but
I have a
don't
little
want to.
pressure on my end, just so you know.
Okay, time wise,
Yeah.
that's fine.
And I
So
feel nice and complete. I feel like you
Yeah, I
did
feel
really
good.
well.
Mhm.
I'm really happy with that. We covered a lot of ground, but nothing too, didn't focus on anything too much. We just kind of covered everything in a sufficient manner.
Flowed
Gr-
very nicely.
yeah,
Great
Dec-
information.
decent engagement in the chat. Thanks everyone to for being here and participating. If we didn't address your comment or something like that, then reach out to me. I saw Caroline. You asked a question about someone who feels stuck. Reach out to me personally. Maybe we can have a conversation, and I'll see if I can help in some way. But I wanted to kind of keep this more to the topic and everything. But yeah, I think that's a good as place as any to wrap this up. So again, thanks everyone for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. We're live every Saturday, noon Central. Although I've got some things kind of coming up in my life that I may have to put the show on pause. I can't say for sure yet when or how to what degree that's going to happen, but I guess just to like keep that in mind. I'll do my best though to be consistent, but things are going to get a little bit topsy turvy in just my overall setup, and I could be going back on the road basically full time. But I plan to get a full setup with a hotspot and do my shows from the road because I'm committed. But there's going to be some, like a little bit of a acclimation to that. So just keep that in mind. But I'll try to give a heads up or at least post on social media if and when I need to take a little break to handle some stuff. But thank you, Stephanie, Leslie, and Will. Your insights and contributions were incredible. Really just made this a very quality conversation. So thank you for that. And I think we've done the topic justice from parts 1, 2, and 3, covering all this ground. And hopefully this is something that can help people kind of make some shifts, and whether you're in a relationship and that can help your mindset and how you're approaching that, or just how you're handling yourself, how you're showing up in the world, and maybe what you're attracting or not, not attracting or repelling away from you based on where you're at. So with all that said, thank you guys again. I think I've said that. I'm always awkward with these. So yeah, thank you
Thank you,
everyone. And
Logan, Will, Stephanie. It's been super
Same.
fun. I've enjoyed this. It was really, I feel like, important and high quality, needed conversation.
absolutely.
It's a great series. I appreciate you all. Well done.
Yeah,
Yep.
same. Thank you,
Likewise.
everybody.
Good stuff. So we'll see you here next week. But until then, be empowered, inspired, and encouraged. Thank you.